Chapter 735. The helicopter slowly lowered its altitude in the pure blue sky. Below was a delicate and beautiful small town that almost looked like a telephone. The town was not big, without industrial pollution or dense traffic. The autumn leaves fell on the flat streets, with a touch of messy beauty, but the whole city was extremely clean. Villas were scattered in picturesque places, and large areas of greenery surrounded the whole city. The continuous green color and yellow leaves extended all the way to the end of the small town. The spectacular white waterfall gushed out of the mountain and fell down, turning into a clear lake around the city. The quiet and beautiful town surrounded by the lake seemed elegant, as if it had been forgotten by the whole world. This is the best world of mortals. Qin Wei-bai looked down at the scene through the window of the cabin, and a touch of longing flashed on her perfect face. No disputes, no calculations, no fatigue, and no struggle. If you don't want to do something, then don't do it. Real freedom, peace and joy. It's too idealistic. In fact, there are some small disputes and contradictions, but most of them are controllable. Compared with the outside, this place deserves the word best. Lin Yuxian smiled. As the helicopter landed on the neat lawn, he opened the cabin door and bowed slightly. Patriarch, please. Qin Wei-bai nodded and walked out of the cabin. It had been a month since she got the body of the god of war, and Qin Wei-bai officially came to Switzerland. This was also the first time she came to the headquarters of the Lin clan. Her feet stepped on the green grass, and she looked up slightly at the small town in front of her and the welcoming crowd in the small town. Under the ancient mottled and poetic city wall, the welcoming crowd stood quietly and neatly, and everyone was staring at Qin Wei-bai. A golden fishtail dress wrapped her exquisite figure. Most of the time, she wore no makeup and wore light makeup. Under the golden top hat, her sharp and delicate face looked more dreamy. Wearing silver high-heeled shoes and a delicate handbag, she walked out of the cabin with horsewoman standing beside her. Lin Yuxian bowed slightly. The bright and warm sunshine fell on her golden dress. The indescribable beauty and nobility were like a force sweeping the whole city. Quiet, mysterious, cold, and dreamy. She looked sacred. This was the first time that Qin Wei-bai came to the headquarters of the Lin clan, Wolfrey Heights. It was also the first time that the new patriarch of the Lin clan came to Wolfrey Heights. Before that, the patriarchs of the branches of the Lin clan scattered around the world all rushed back to Wolfrey Heights. The relationship between the headquarters of the Lin clan and the major branches had always been very loose. The headquarters provided the necessary development funds for the branches in the early stage, and after the branches matured, they also had to fulfill the responsibility of supporting the headquarters in terms of funds. Simply put, the headquarters and the major branches usually had no contact with each other except for receiving the funds from the major branches. Only when a branch encountered a great problem would the branch contact the headquarters and apply for arbitration from the headquarters. There had always been only one result of the arbitration, that was, the branch naturally helped the branch. The Lin clan would draw up a support plan as soon as possible. It was possible to ask other branches to give financial support, human support, or even military support and technical support to the branch in need of help. The Lin clan, which had developed for hundreds of years, had never interfered with the development of the branches. The major branches were densely packed on the genealogy, which could be described as various. There were consortiums in Europe, gangsters in North America, drug lords in South America, and warlords in Africa. No matter what kind of support a branch needed for help, the Lin clan could always give it what it needed at the first time. When a branch encountered a disaster, the patriarch of the headquarters would even intervene in person. For hundreds of years, the headquarters of the Lin clan had an expert at the peak of the invincible realm in each generation, which was also one of the keys to the headquarters' transcendent status. In general, the headquarters of the Lin clan had been living a peaceful life for hundreds of years. What they had done most was to coordinate the relationship between the major branches, give some help when necessary, and take back some money. The branches did not give much to the headquarters. The headquarters did not give much to the branches either. But the existence of each other was extremely important to each other. This was the perfect mutual need in politics. To be exact, this was an alliance, which was extremely stable and almost unbreakable. Hundreds of years might make the affection between countless branches and the headquarters become indifferent, but in this alliance, it didn't matter at all. The most important thing was that the two sides could give each other, but no one was a burden to the other. The headquarters did not need the money and power of the branches. Money, power and status, to put it bluntly, were all external forces. Whether these things were important or not depended on what they could do. And if these things could be done, the headquarters could also do it. They received feedback from the major branches and could do almost everything. When the headquarters had so much money that they couldn't even count it, what was the point of the so-called interests? Similarly, the life in the headquarters was not what the major branches liked. That kind of leisure and freedom might be accepted by the majority of people, but it was not suitable for ambitious people. They could do whatever they wanted in the outside world, had money and power, and had strong support from all over the world. They did not covet the headquarters, and even if they did, what could they covet? The headquarters had almost no requirements for them. They were a group of carefree, lazy people. What they usually did was to coordinate the work of the major branches and be impartial. Even if they wanted to usurp the throne and become the patriarch of the headquarters, they still had to do this kind of work. They might not do it, but this was equivalent to destroying the survival mode of the entire Lin clan. The major branches would not agree. And those who didn't want to do this work would mostly set up new branches instead of usurping the throne, because the consequences of failure would be serious, and there would be no benefits if they succeeded. On the contrary, the more stable the core position of the headquarters was, the more stable the development of the major branches would be. This was a real win-win situation. This kind of alliance model was diametrically opposed to the way the Wang family of Beihai gathered all the branches. The Lin clan's approach would reduce the cohesion within the clan. To some extent, it would disperse the scale, and then reduce the deterrent, but it would never have to worry about internal strife. This kind of alliance was extremely stable. As long as they did not encounter an unimaginable foreign enemy that fundamentally destroyed the headquarters and all the branches of the Lin clan, this model of the Lin clan could develop for 500 years, 1,000 years, or even longer. The most important condition of this model was that there must be an expert in the headquarters who could control the situation, not only in the Lin clan, but also in the entire dark world. For example, Lin Fengting now. The idea of the Wang family of Beihai was undoubtedly to strengthen the cohesion within the family without limit. In the entire Beihai province, there were 7 sword-holding families, and dozens of branches of the Wang family of Beihai were all gathered together. While they shared interests with each other, sometimes it was tantamount to forcing the branches to be loyal to the family. This kind of forced cohesion was undoubtedly the most terrible at times. This was also the fundamental reason why the Wang family of Beihai had been the #1 power in the dark world for hundreds of years. However, the strong centralization of power would also lead to increasing conflicts of interests, so the Wang family of Beihai had never been calm. When the contradictions accumulated to a certain extent, reshuffling became a fixed procedure. Therefore, for hundreds of years, the Wang family of Beihai would almost break out a very fierce internal conflict every once in a while. It might last for decades, or it might last for hundreds of years. For example, the rift between Wang Qinglei and Wang Tianzong was getting clearer and clearer. Similar situations had played out several times in the past. This kind of absolute crisis also contained huge opportunities. If the Wang family of Beihai did not handle it well, it would fall apart. Once the reshuffling was successful, the Wang family of Beihai would be reborn, and the cohesion of the whole Beihai would return to its peak state. During that period, they were often the most invincible force in the dark world. They would quickly strengthen themselves in this process. Then, as time went by, they would wait for new contradictions to break out, reshuffle again, and become stronger again. Just like the current Wang family of Beihai. Wang Tianzong was missing. Wang Xiaoyao openly rebelled. The deterrent power of the Wang family of Beihai was reduced to the lowest point. But as long as the Wang family of Beihai could survive the current difficulties and wait for the 2 brothers Wang Tianzong and Wang Xiaoyao to decide the winner, as long as the Wang family of Beihai was still there, they would still stand at the peak of the dark world for at least the next decades or hundreds of years. One was to control the major branches and frantically centralize power to increase the overall strength. The other was to let all the branches go, and most of the time, they did not care about anything and stood aloof from the world. These were the 2 completely different development models of the Wang family and the Lin clan. Qin Weibai could not tell the difference between the 2 development models, but she could clearly see that they were 2 different development concepts. It was like seeing the characters of the ancestors of the Wang family and the Lin clan. This was the origin of the 2 families, and it was also the development model that continued to this day. The first chosen one of the Wang family of Beihai always believed in his family. He thought that the whole could defeat everything by gathering all the forces. So there was the current Wang family of Beihai. For hundreds of years, there were ups and downs. Even if it was temporarily underestimated, it still had the power to return to the peak. The first war god of the Lin clan always believed in individuals. He believed that an invincible individual could sweep the whole world. So there was the current Lin clan. The headquarters maintained an absolute high-end combat capability and stood aloof from the world. The branches developed freely. For hundreds of years, they had no ups and downs, never fell into underestimation, and never set foot on the peak. They had always stood in a position that was within reach of the peak, neither advancing nor retreating. Their stability was chilling. Qin Weibai stood there quietly. No one knew what she was thinking in such a short time. The heads and representatives of the major branches of the Lin clan also stood quietly, looking at their new patriarch. She was not an invincible realm expert. But this was the choice of Lin Fengting, the strongest expert in the dark world. Qin Weibai took a step forward. Golden dress, silver shoes, perfect face, dreamlike, sacred and noble. Hello. Her voice sounded in front of worry-free villa, clear and light. Everyone bowed slightly at the same time. Patriarch. Qin Weibai nodded. Let's go back and talk. She walked to the city gate. She said go back, not go in. It seemed that from this moment on, she had officially entered the role of the patriarch. It might take a long time to think, but a decision often took only a moment. She was the patriarch of the Lin clan, and the direction of the Lin clan for the next few decades would be controlled by her. Judging from the current situation in the dark world, the Lin clan was in a really good situation. Because Lin Fengting's realm was too high. Wang Tianzong's injury could not be healed in a short time. The same was true of Li Kuang too. Lin Fengting was the only one who had broken through the peak of the invincible realm and could restore a certain amount of combat capability in a short time. This time, the peak of the entire dark world was really in front of the Lin clan. As long as they reached out, they could replace the position of the Wang family of Beihai. Qin Weibai didn't know if the Lin clan had such an opportunity in history, but in the face of this opportunity, she finally chose to give it up. She chose to follow the original direction of the Lin clan and stood in a position close to the peak, neither moving forward nor retreating. This might be what Lin Fengting hoped. He didn't mind that Qin Weibai used the resources of the Lin clan to support Li Tianlan and Emperor Dong's palace. But the basic attitude of the headquarters of the Lin clan to stand aloof from the world could not be changed. How to operate it was Qin Weibai's own business. There were very few tall buildings in Worry-Free Villa. The so-called tall buildings here were buildings that were more than 6 floors above the ground. The autumn sunshine fell evenly on this small town that stood aloof from the world. The autumn wind blew, and the fallen leaves on the ground seemed to be lazy. Qin Weibai got into a custom-made black car. There were 4 people in the car, including horsewoman. One of them was a female driver and bodyguard, about 30 years old. She looked ordinary, but her expression was extremely focused. The other was a secretary assistant, a little younger, who was responsible for helping Qin Weibai deal with the daily affairs of the Lin clan. This was all arranged by the Lin clan, so Qin Weibai didn't say much. The mighty welcome motorcade drove into the gate of Worry-Free Villa and entered an extremely wide welcome avenue. Slowly going down the wide welcome avenue, the motorcade gradually drove into a tunnel-like space. Qin Weibai raised her eyebrows. The secretary sitting in the passenger seat noticed Qin Weibai's expression and said softly, "Patriarch, Yingbin Avenue is the only driveway on the surface of Worry-Free Villa. It connects all the underground traffic roads. Only after leaving Yingbin Avenue can you really enter Worry-Free Villa. There are no vehicles or parking lots on the ground of the villa. In terms of ground planning, it is a large modern park. We built the underground traffic network of the villa hundreds of years ago. The underground driveway extends to every corner of the villa, and we have set up elevators and buildings. All the internal vehicles of the Lin clan usually travel underground." Qin Weibai nodded. "Shenzhou City." "Yes." The secretary nodded and said in a proud tone, "Everything in Worry-Free Villa is similar to Shenzhou City, the capital of Beihai Province. Shenzhou City is the most beautiful city in Zhongzhou State, and Worry-Free Villa is more exquisite in this respect than Shenzhou City." Qin Weibai nodded with a smile. The whole city of Shenzhou City was also a park structure. There were only pedestrians on the ground, and no vehicles could be seen. The Wang family of Beihai used a lot of money to build all the traffic roads in Shenzhou City. The whole city looked like a huge garden. This multi-level urban structure meant that there were no so-called driveways in the whole city, only sidewalks. The driveways were built underground, which not only alleviated pollution, but also greatly reduced traffic accidents. Together with the subway line of Shangzhou City, it effectively solved the traffic pressure. In the survey of Zhongzhou State, Shangzhou City was the city with the best air index, the lowest pollution, the largest green area, and the highest satisfaction of people's lives among all the cities in Zhongzhou State. It was not that no city wanted to imitate Shangzhou City, but they could only think about it. Such a transformation was equivalent to rebuilding a city. Not only would it waste a city's financial income for many years, but Yu Zhou could not approve the project. At present, Shangzhou City was the only city in Zhongzhou State that needed this kind of ridiculously expensive transformation. It is indeed more exquisite than Shangzhou City, Qin Weibai said. She had been to Shangzhou City more than once. Bicycles could occasionally be seen on the ground of Shangzhou City. And in worry-free villa. What was a bicycle? Perhaps most people did not have this concept. How many people are in the villa now? How big is the villa? Qin Weibai asked. The secretary thought for a moment and said accurately, the villa covers an area of about 40 square kilometers. Now there are 3,227 people who stay in the villa all year round, but there will definitely be more and more people in the future. Qin Weibai nodded and said, I like it here. The secretary pursed her lips and smiled. Her little face was shining with pride from the bottom of her heart. The motorcade finally stopped in the underground parking lot near the center of the small town. The secretary led Qin Weibai into the elevator. When the elevator door opened, they had already entered a single-family villa with an exclusive small courtyard. This is your exclusive elevator with fingerprint identification. This is your office and residence. Patriarch, if there is anything else you need or if there is anything you are not satisfied with, you can tell me and I will arrange it right away. The secretary said with a smile. Qin Weibai glanced at the decoration in the hall and nodded casually. What's your name? I am Lin Ying, Patriarch. It is my honor to serve you. There was a touch of intimacy in Lin Ying's voice. In the Lin clan, which was not completely isolated from the world, the freedom of most people was based on the responsibility of a small number of people. The Lin clan had Lin Fengting, so the headquarters of the Lin clan stood aloof from the world. But the Lin clan had more than Lin Fengting. Lin Ying was undoubtedly also the core member of the next generation of the Lin clan. The fact that she could be called the secretary of the patriarch of the Lin clan had already explained this. Standing in her position, he could see the whole dark world more clearly, so he naturally knew Qin Weibai better. That kind of perfection, that kind of coldness, that kind of dreamy, that kind of wisdom, that kind of strength, that kind of expression. She was the most perfect woman, the one and only. She was the goddess of the dark world, and she deserved it. So Lin Ying's words were not flattery or compliments. They were completely from the bottom of her heart. Qin Weibai replied with a and sat on the sofa. She took off the top hat on her head, casually combed her hair and asked, when will the old patriarch come? About 2 hours later. Lin Ying said. The old patriarch referred to Lin Fengting. During this time, he had been staying in the Wang family of Beihai. Qin Weibai had wanted to come to the headquarters of the Lin clan a month ago. Lin Fengting knew very well why she came here and reminded her that the situation of the person she wanted to see was very unstable. It was better to stay in Yuzhou to deal with some other things. Qin Weibai waited patiently for nearly a month and then received a call from Lin Fengting. Although they did not come to Switzerland together, they would arrive on the same day. Qin Weibai thought for a moment and said slowly, in this case, inform the representatives of the major branches that they don't need to come here now. At 7 o'clock in the evening, we'll have a meeting. I need to rest for a while. Okay. Lin Ying nodded and waited for a few seconds. Seeing that Qin Weibai had no other orders, she bowed slightly and left the villa. Qin Weibai was silent for a moment and reached out to Horsewoman. Horsewoman carefully put down a small backpack on her back, took out a square box from the backpack, and carefully placed it in front of Qin Weibai. Her eyes were a little complicated and excited. Qin Weibai looked at the box with a somewhat complicated expression. Thank you. Horsewoman suddenly spoke. Her tone was very sincere and serious. Since she got the body of the war god, she became more and more respectful to Qin Weibai. Even saint and military counselor became more and more respectful to her. Qin Wei-bai shook her head tiredly and said faintly, "You shouldn't say thank you." Horsewoman was stunned. She smiled bitterly and did not speak. "Do you know why I must have this half of the body of the war god?" Qin Wei-bai said softly, "If I give up this thing, I can get more things. For me and Emperor Dong's palace, the price that the Wang family of Beihai is willing to pay for this half of the body of the war god is even beyond your imagination." "To save people," Horsewoman said respectfully. "Then why should I save people?" Qin Wei-bai raised the corner of her mouth slightly with a sneer. "I don't know how to view my relationship with her, but if I say that I am the one who wants her dead the most, no one can object, right?" Horsewoman's eyes froze. She looked at Qin Wei-bai and did not speak. There were too many seemingly incredible relationships that were difficult to define. She did not understand the current Qin Wei-bai, but she also understood the current Qin Wei-bai very well. She understood her pride. From this point of view, Qin Wei-bai was indeed the one who wanted her dead the most. This was a fact that could not be denied. Qin Wei-bai stood up and walked to the bedside. She looked at the sky of the Lin clan through the window and said softly, "I don't owe her anything. She changed my fate, and I also changed her fate. We are even. Don't you think so?" Horsewoman frowned and finally said yes. "So when she wakes up, I want her to give my man back to me. I don't need her charity, but she owes me, and I want to get it back." Qin Wei-bai's delicate and dreamy face was expressionless, but her bright eyes flashed with incomparably clear stubbornness and pride. "Me loving him and her asking me to love him are two different things." The clouds passed over the clear sky. Qin Wei-bai looked up at the blue sky, and her voice was soft but insistent. Horsewoman thought of a saying. The biggest enemy in everyone's life was no one else. Chapter 736. Lin Fengting's return was very low-key. Unlike the new patriarch who stepped into his own tribe for the first time, his return was a real home. Relatively speaking, the representatives of the major branches who came here were outsiders, so the representatives did not come to greet Lin Fengting. Even Lin Yuxian did not come. Only Qin Wei-bai stood on the grass outside the city with Horsewoman, watching the helicopter landing slowly and waiting silently. The helicopter landed in front of them. The roaring wind made Qin Wei-bai's long hair dance wildly. In the cold wind, Qin Wei-bai took a few steps forward. The sound of the wind faded. The door of the cabin opened. Lin Fengting, who was a little pale but in good spirits, came out and looked at Qin Wei-bai with a smile. "Welcome back." Qin Wei-bai's tone was calm and natural. She stretched out her hand to Lin Fengting. Lin Fengting nodded with a smile. Looking at the tender white hand that she stretched out naturally, he raised his eyebrows slightly and looked at Qin Wei-bai with playful eyes. "I don't have so many problems with her," Qin Wei-bai said. "It's really surprising." Lin Fengting smiled and held Qin Wei-bai's palm. He quietly looked at the sky of his family and was silent for a while. Then he whispered, "It's better to be at home. I don't feel anything outside. Only when I come back can I feel tired." Qin Wei-bai said calmly, "Thank you for your hard work, sir." Lin Fengting suddenly smiled and said, "Patriarch, let me introduce a friend to you." He turned to look at the cabin. At the door of the cabin, a young woman in a white antibacterial suit walked out of the cabin door and saw Qin Wei-bai. Qin Wei-bai raised her eyebrows little by little. Her face was too delicate. This small movement did not destroy her beauty, but it made her suddenly more indescribable fierceness and strength. She looked at her charming silver eyes and was silent for a while. Then she said, "Beihai Silver Eyes? Nice to meet you, Boss Qin." Naylan Shurying's tone was indifferent. It was not the kind of indifference that kept people 1,000 miles away, but a kind of indifference that did not care about anything. She lived in the core area of Mount Dibing all year round and was one of the most mysterious core members of the Wang family of Beihai. She did not know why Qin Wei-bai knew her, and she did not want to know. One after another, figures in white antibacterial suits came out from behind Naylan Shurying. 3 men and 3 women, most of them middle-aged. Wang Junyi, Chen He, Situya, Song Qiu, Naylan Lingfeng, childhood. Qin Wei-bai's eyes swept over them one by one. "Hello, doctors of Team 002. Naylan Shurying's silver pupils suddenly shrank. The expressions of the 6 people behind her changed drastically. Everyone looked at Qin Wei-bai as if they had seen a ghost. Not a human, damn it. It was a ghost. They were the top researchers in the Beihai Biological Laboratory. The Wang family of Beihai had the strictest confidentiality measures for such top talents in a certain field. But now it seemed that the so-called confidentiality measures were nothing in front of Qin Weibai. She not only called out their names, but also directly called out their team number in the Wang family of Beihai Biological Laboratory. They didn't even dare to think about what this meant. Lin Fengting's expression also changed slightly before returning to normal. You want to save her? Qin Weibai glanced at Lin Fengting and said lightly. Aren't you here to save people as well? Lin Fengting said with a smile. Qin Weibai snorted and looked at Nailan Shuying and Team 002 in front of her. What do you mean? To get a grasp of the situation, Team 002 will stay here. Lin Fengting said seriously. In this matter, the Beihai family is very sincere. The Wang family of Beihai is very sincere. They are really generous, Qin Weibai said calmly. There were many teams in the biological laboratory of the Wang family of Beihai. There were 6 people in a group and they were arranged according to their serial numbers. The order was clear and straightforward. The number at the front also indicated the importance and professional quality of the team in the laboratory. The 000 team was the team that developed the body of the war god. They were undoubtedly extremely important, but they also had strong limitations. Their life work had nothing to do with the research of other gene potions. The only thing they were responsible for was the body of the war god. As the leader of this generation of the biological laboratory of the Wang family of Beihai, Team 001 was led by Silver Eyes Nailan Shuying of Beihai. Everyone in the team was a treasure to the Wang family of Beihai. They mainly developed the 3rd generation of immortality potions and improved some other cutting-edge potions of the Wang family of Beihai. The 002 team was the top main force of the biological laboratory. In terms of professionalism, they might not be as professional as 001, but they were extremely knowledgeable. They had no specific projects. Their biggest job was research and development. They developed new gene potions, made and improved existing potions, determined the use of some rare medicinal materials, and sometimes worked together with the 001 team to overcome technical bottlenecks. The 002 team was the real core of the Wang family of Beihai's biological laboratory. They were the link between the previous and the next. The Wang family of Beihai sent the 002 team to Where Free Heights this time, which showed their sincerity. You can think of it as the Wang family of Beihai's self-redemption. Lin Fengting said with a smile. Qin Weibai nodded to Nailan Shuying, turned to her car and said slowly, Summer Solstice doesn't think so. Lin Fengting smiled gently. They are not sinners and don't need redemption. At least Summer Solstice doesn't think that the Wang family of Beihai is a sinner. In fact, they are not. Such great sincerity is nothing more than to increase the bargaining chips for compromise in the future. Qin Weibai opened the door and looked at Lin Fengting. Shall we go there now? Of course, every second counts. Lin Fengting took a deep breath, nodded, and sat in the passenger seat. Nailan Shuying had already taken the 002 team into a business car. The car started slowly, entered the underground driveway of Where Free Heights, and stopped near the edge of the city. Lin Fengting personally led the way and entered his own villa. They took the special elevator. They entered the password. The elevator sank all the way for nearly 10 seconds before it stopped. Voice verification. Fingerprint verification. Body scan. Pupil scan. 3rd level password verification. After a series of tedious processes, the elevator door finally opened. What appeared in front of everyone was a metal passage shrouded in soft light. Is this the biological laboratory of the Lin clan? Nailan Shuying, who had been silent, asked curiously. Yes. Lin Fengting nodded. Compared with the laboratory of the Wang family of Beihai, the scale is still a little smaller, and the equipment is slightly worse. The new equipment from the Wang family of Beihai is already on the way, and it will take about a week to arrive. Nailan Shuying followed Lin Fengting out of the elevator, frowned, and said, Only the new equipment in Beihai can record the most detailed data of the injured's body. The data of the current equipment may be biased. The deviation won't be very big. Dr. Nailan, I'll have to trouble you for the next week. When the new equipment arrives, we will give you the detailed data of the injured as soon as possible. Then someone will pick you up and take you to Shenyuan City in Tiannan. Lin Fengting said in a gentle voice. Nayland Shuriying hesitated and nodded. Shenyuan City in Tiannan. That was where she would work in the future. She would work for Dong Huang, who had been imprisoned in the desert prison, instead of for the Wang family of Beihai. This was the deal between Li Tianlan and Summer Solstice, or it could be said that it was one of the terms of the compromise of the Wang family of Beihai. She would leave Beihai and build a new biological laboratory for Emperor Dong's palace with several core technologies in the biological laboratory. This process would last for 10 years. After 10 years, she could return to Beihai. Nayland Shuriying had no choice. The group of people walked on the flat metal path. The more they walked forward, the more silent Qin Weibai became. The atmosphere seemed to become a little depressed in her silence. Pushing open the thick glass door at the end of the passage, a scene familiar to Nayland Shuriying and her Team 002 appeared in front of everyone. The clean and almost cold silver walls, the neatly hung screens, the multifunctional test bench, the electronic recorder, the detector, the large microscope, the multifunctional decomposition device, and the dormitories and small laboratories around the hall. Quiet, rigorous, neat, and professional. After leaving Beihai, Nayland Shuriying, who had been a little nervous, gradually relaxed. On such an occasion, her whole aura seemed to be changing. Where are the injured? She took the initiative to ask. Follow me. Lin Fengting nodded and continued to walk forward. He pushed open the door of the conference room, entered a coffee room in the conference room, and calmly opened a dark room in the coffee room. A dark passage appeared in front of everyone. Lin Fengting took the lead and walked in. The passage was not long. After a distance of dozens of meters, the environment in front of them became soft and bright again. What appeared in front of everyone was a round superalloy door without any gap. Two expressionless middle-aged women stood motionless on both sides of the door like statues. Everyone couldn't help but look at each other with solemn hearts. At the same time, they were curious about the identity of the person behind the door who needed such strict protection. Lin Fengting looked at the door in front of him, and a complicated look flashed in his eyes. He whispered, "Open the door." Two middle-aged women with extremely cold auras bowed slightly and entered a set of passwords at the same time. The superalloy door, which was strong enough to resist the bombing of missiles at close range, slowly turned to one side. An extremely warm breath gushed out of the space behind the door. "Please come in." Lin Fengting sighed and subconsciously glanced at Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai's expression was as calm as water. Lin Fengting walked in with his people, and the superalloy door slowly closed again. A huge glass cover appeared in front of everyone. Countless things like bubbles and liquids filled most of the space inside the glass cover. A young woman with her eyes closed was buried in it, revealing only a delicate and perfect dreamy face. It was an incomparably pale face, without a trace of blood. The paleness was almost transparent, with extreme morbidity. But it still couldn't hide the beauty of this face. She was devastatingly beautiful. She was an outstanding beauty. Her eyes were closed, as if she was immersed in the deepest dream, and her whole body had no breath. Everyone looked at this scene with their mouths agape. Nayland Shuriying's body suddenly shook. She stared for a long time with her eyes wide open. Then she turned her head in disbelief and looked at Qin Weibai. "Why are you looking at me?" Qin Weibai stared at Nayland Shuriying expressionlessly. "She?" Nayland Shuriying shook her head in confusion and said incredulously, "Who is she?" "She is the wounded person you need to treat." Chapter 737. Nayland Shuriying turned her head again, looked at the woman in the glass cover, and took a deep breath. Countless incredible and absurd ideas kept flashing in her mind, and finally turned into disbelief. She took 2 steps forward subconsciously and reached out to touch the glass cover in front of her. Her eyes were a little dazed. The person in the cover lay quietly inside. Her pale, almost transparent, perfect face looked extremely delicate. She restrained her sharpness and extinguished her consciousness. That kind of fragility and helplessness were displayed in front of everyone's eyes. But she gave people a serene feeling. If death was an eternal sinking, she must have been really willing before falling into the darkness. Qin Weibai looked at it calmly, without any expression on her face, but her snow-white hands were clenched tightly. For many years, she had made countless plans, walked on the edge of the blade, mixed in conspiracies, and built her own general trend. The trip to Europe, the Samsara Palace, the 12 Supermasters, the extermination of Night Spirit, the Blue Sky Underworld, the Emperor Weapons Mountain, the decisive battle in Heaven Capital, the chaos in Eastern Europe, the Judgment Day, the Termination Day, Mormons, and the Eternal Sword. She said she had been happy. Qin Weibai believed her. But every time Qin Weibai saw her, she planned all of this in an extremely cautious manner. The strength that she showed to the outside world on the basis of countless plans made her an extremely dazzling woman in the dark world. But every time Qin Weibai saw her, she could only feel the extreme sense of exhaustion and expectation from her. She had really used up all her means, all her trump cards, and offered everything she had. The end of Eastern Europe and the end of the dark world. In the frenzied general trend, she personally pierced his chest, stained with blood, with all she had, what she missed, and what she was attached to, all her deep feelings and reluctance. Rising. Burning. The eternal sword. Countless obsessions completely ended at that moment. She seemed to have let go of a lot of things, but there was only one thing she could not let go. But it didn't matter. The entire dark world was almost buried with her. She officially took away an era. The shadows dissipated, the wind and rain stopped, and a sky without shadows was shrouding the person she could not let go of the most. He had his own radiance. All the meeting darkness was her own darkness. Qin Weibai took a deep breath and murmured softly, "How can you be so important?" Horsewoman and Lin Fengting glanced at her at the same time. Qin Weibai's voice gradually grew louder. "Why are you so important?" The knight's expression changed. Lin Fengting narrowed his eyes. Qin Weibai walked to the glass cover and looked at the transparent figure inside, who could be said to be infinitely close to death. She said very seriously, "I'm not convinced." The woman in the glass cover closed her eyes and did not respond. She was like the most exquisite and perfect work of art. Quiet, beautiful, gorgeous, dreamy, but without the slightest vitality. Qin Weibai turned to look at Nalan Shuriying beside her and said in a tough tone, "Save her." Nalan Shuriying glanced at Qin Weibai. She didn't know what the relationship between the two women inside and outside the glass cover was. After guessing for a while, she finally said, "I will do my best." A middle-aged woman in her 50s walked out from a secret door. She was holding a folder in her hand. When she saw the crowd surrounding the glass dome, she was stunned and frowned. Lin Fengting smiled and waved at her. "Sister, let me introduce you. This is Dr. Nalan Shuriying from the Wang family of Beihai. She is the chief person in charge of the biological laboratory of Beihai. Dr. Nalan, this is my cousin, Lin Fengyue. She is currently in charge of the biological laboratory of the Lin clan." He did not introduce Qin Weibai. As the new patriarch of the Lin clan, although it was the first time for Qin Weibai to come to the Lin clan, a core figure like Lin Fengyue naturally knew her existence. "Hello, Dr. Nalan." Lin Fengyue took the initiative to reach out and shake hands with Nalan Shuriying. The person in charge of the biological laboratory of the Lin clan was not beautiful. She was in her early 50s, and there were even some age spots on her face. Her hair was almost all white, and she looked gloomy and serious from head to toe. She obviously knew what Nalan Shuriying was here for, but she did not show any mercy when she spoke. She just said seriously, "I thought Dr. Nalan and your team could do their best. It is said that the biological laboratory of the Wang family of Beihai is unparalleled in the world. I am not convinced. Dr. Nalan, I hope you can prove this to me." Nalan Shuriying nodded and did not take it seriously. "I need the physical data and brainwave records of the injured, as well as the report of cell activity in the past 72 hours, blood tests, body x-rays, and your conclusions." Lin Fengyue took a deep look at her, handed the folder in her hand to Nalan Shuriying, and sighed. "Most of the things you want are here, please come with me." At present, the data of the injured are at the lowest point. Many of the data are even lower than the theoretical survival data. We have tried various methods, we have tried all kinds of methods. We have used a lot of recovery drugs, but it didn't work. The method you see now is the result of our best efforts. Nalan Shuriying looked back at the huge glass cover. The glass cover was naturally not glass. The things inside that looked like bubbles were naturally not bubbles either. This kind of huge transparent glass cover was mostly used in aerospace engineering. It was an extremely rare fusion metal that could form the best sealed space. The foam inside was a semi-solid nutrient solution that had a large amount of restorative drugs added into it. This nutrient solution was very airtight and easy to absorb. It was also at a constant temperature and was soft enough to not harm the injured person's body. Not only could it better maintain her almost completely exhausted vitality, but the greatest role that the nutrient solution could play was just maintenance. The vitality of the injured, even in the nutrient solution, was still declining little by little, but the speed was much slower than under normal circumstances. But no matter how slow it was, there would always be an end, and that would be real death. In fact, the Lin clan was busy saving the injured during this time, but their greatest efforts were not on how to let her recover, but on how to slow down the loss of her vitality in the nutrient solution all day long. We have already sent the first batch of body data to Beihai half a month ago, the second batch of data was sent a week ago, and the third batch of data was sent 3 days ago. Dr. Naylan, the data in your hand is from yesterday. I want to know if you have any ideas, even if it is some vague ideas. This injured person is very important to the Lin clan, and it is also very important for the improvement of our technology in the field of biology. Lin Fengyue led a group of people into her laboratory and spoke with a serious expression. Your thinking is wrong. Naylan Shuriying was silent for a moment. It doesn't work to slow down the loss of the injured person's vitality. It doesn't even make sense. At present, the most important thing is her body. The vitality of the injured person is already very low, and it is even the lowest data to maintain survival because her injury is too serious and her body is too poor. The reason why her vitality is constantly flowing away is that her body can no longer bear anything, including the vitality in her body. No one spoke. After nearly a minute, Lin Fengyue blinked and tentatively said, You mean, she is already dead? Naylan Shuriying said directly. Chapter 738. What nonsense are you talking about? Just as Naylan Shuriying's voice fell, Knight's somewhat angry voice suddenly sounded. Dr. Lin just said that she still has vitality. She fiercely glared at Naylan Shuriying. Her face was distorted and looked somewhat ferocious. But her body is already dead. Naylan Shuriying said seriously, Vitality is the guarantee to support the survival of the body. As long as the body exists, vitality can't keep flowing away. The Lin clan's way of dealing with it is very professional. Under such circumstances, her vitality is still declining, which can only mean that her body is dead. That vitality is the last trace of activity of this body. A dead body naturally can't retain vitality. The Lin clan's current method is equivalent to forcibly keeping a person who is about to die, which is like defying the heavens. The knight's body shook violently, his face as pale as snow. Is there any other way? Lin Fengting said in a low voice. He had never thought that the situation would be so bad. Fuse. Naylan Shuriying said calmly, This is the only way I can think of to strengthen her already dead body and temporarily fuse her vitality with this body. This? The corners of Lin Fengyue's mouth twitched. In the end, she couldn't help but smile bitterly. Our Lin clan doesn't have such a technique. As far as I know, the so-called fusion technique is only in theory. Even if we can do it, the vitality in the injured person's body won't be enough to support this body. That vitality is too little for a dying person. Yes, so once the fusion is successful, the data we get will be even worse than it is now, much worse. She will also be closer to death than she is now, but that way, she can preserve the last bit of her life force in her body. Naylan Shuriying's voice grew calmer and calmer. Beads of sweat appeared on Lin Fengyue's forehead. It's worse than the current data, she whispered to herself with an ugly expression on her face. This state, neither dead nor alive. Naylan Shuriying said slowly. Right now, the remaining vitality is not enough to support her life. Once the vitality completely fuses with the body, in the biological sense, she is no longer a living person, just not dead. How to fuse them? Lin Fengyue shook her head and said, There's no time. Naylan Shuriying turned to look at Qin Weibai. Before I came here, Aunt Xia Ji told me that you have half a body of the war god? She asked softly. The body of the god of war. Lin Fengting was stunned. Even he didn't know what it was. Qin Weibai glanced at Horsewoman. The knight took out the small square box from his bag and handed it to Naylan Shuriying. Are you confident? Qin Weibai said solemnly. It's not a matter of confidence. Naylan Shuriying shook her head. This is the only solution. But after the fusion, What's the difference between her and being dead? Qin Weibai's tone was almost interrogative. Perhaps even she herself did not know that her current mood was quite sensitive and agitated. The biggest difference is that she's not dead. Naylan Shuriying said honestly. This explanation was so powerful that Qin Weibai was speechless for a moment. She was not dead. That was the difference. However, the injured after the fusion was no longer considered to be alive. What I need is to heal her and make her recover. Qin Weibai said coldly. After the fusion, it's just to keep her from dying completely. This is the first step. The second step is activation. Naylan Shuriying said calmly. Activation? Qin Weibai's eyes lit up. The third generation of eternal life? Have you succeeded? Naylan Shuriying gave her a strange look and narrowed her eyes. No matter how indifferent she was to the world, she could not help but be curious at this time. The other party could call out the names of everyone in Team 002, and the moment she mentioned activation, she could think of the top secret of the Wang family of Beihai, the third generation of eternal life. How much did she know about the biological laboratory of Beihai? The main function of the body of the war god was fusion, which doubled the body's endurance. The third generation of eternal life activated vitality and doubled it. This was the method that Naylan Shuriying thought of. First, she used the body of the war god to integrate the vitality of the injured with her body, and then used the third generation of eternal life to completely activate the vitality in her body to achieve the expected state of awakening. Then there was a long period of cultivation and recovery. This was also the only feasible way at present. At present, the half of the body of the war god is only a semi-finished product and can only be fused. As for strengthening the body's endurance, the effect is much weaker. The third generation of eternal life also has many technical bottlenecks, even more than the bottlenecks of the body of the war god. Naylan Shuriying said softly. So. Qin Weibai narrowed her eyes. So drag it on. Naylan Shuriying said, first fuse, so that she will not die, and then wait for the third generation of eternal life. Qin Weibai's body trembled, and she said hoarsely, how long do we have to wait? I don't know. Naylan Shuriying shook her head. Maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years, maybe longer. She looked at Qin Weibai, and there was some sympathy in her bright silver eyes. At that time, maybe you will be old, and so will Li Tianlan. But now she is in a sealed state, and she can maintain it for a long time. Have you ever seen a science fiction movie? Some astronauts can sleep for decades in the cabin during the spacecraft's exploration of space, and their body functions will not deteriorate, and their appearance will not change. It's as if the sleeping time did not exist. Naylan Shuriying said softly, now we don't have such technology, but this nutrition cabin can be close to this level. Coupled with the body of the war god and her current strange state, as long as the nutrition cabin is continuous, she can sleep for at least decades without any change. I think by that time, no matter how difficult it is, the third generation of eternal life should have been successfully developed. No one spoke. Everyone was silent. This method was feasible. But the key was whether Qin Weibai could afford to wait, whether the people sleeping in the nutrition cabin could afford to wait, and whether Li Tianlan could afford to wait. When they woke up, countless eras might have passed. Everyone they cared about, loved and cared about would have become old, or even become yellow soil in history. What did it feel like? Regardless of whether it was to those who were waiting or those who were asleep, this was an unimaginable cruelty. Qin Weibai stood there and was silent for a long time. It won't be that long. A tired voice suddenly sounded. Lin Fengting looked at Naylan Shuriying. The third generation of eternal life can't break through the technical bottleneck at present because there is not enough immortality. That is, a few core materials are missing. His tone was a little low. I will find a way to get these materials and speed up your research process. Everyone knew what he would think of. They would either find them or grab them. That was the only way. Naylan Shuriying wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. In the end, she didn't speak and just looked at Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai didn't speak either. After a long time, Naylan Shuriying said softly, I understand how you feel, but time can't be delayed. The vitality in the patient's body is passing away every moment. The later the decision is made, the worse her condition will be after the fusion. Lin Fengting looked at Qin Weibai and then at Naylan Shuriying. He frowned slightly and didn't speak. Qin Weibai raised her head and slowly glanced at everyone. After a long time she nodded and said, "I see." She slowly turned around and walked out of the laboratory. Her back was still slim and perfect, but it seemed to be covered with a layer of exhaustion. "I see." Nalan Shurying was stunned and stood still. The door of the small laboratory slowly closed. Nalan Shurying turned to look at Lin Fengting. Lin Fengting narrowed his eyes and looked at her. His eyes were extremely sharp, as if they were warm, but also cold. Nalan Shurying subconsciously avoided his eyes. "Her heart is a little confused," Lin Fengting said slowly, his scrutinizing eyes constantly falling on Nalan Shurying. "I can understand." Nalan Shurying took a deep breath and her tone was still calm. "But I didn't. Doctor, I can understand your position, but lies are meaningless here. Do you understand?" Lin Fengting's voice became gentler and gentler. "I'm telling the truth." Nalan Shurying's fingers trembled slightly. Her situation is indeed very serious. "I know that." Lin Fengting said lightly, "This is the truth, but the third generation of eternal life doesn't necessarily need to let the people waiting for her for a lifetime. Or in other words, the third generation of eternal life she needs doesn't necessarily need to wait for a lifetime. The semi-finished body of the god of war can stabilize her, so the next 3 generations of eternal life may not necessarily be the finished product, right?" Nalan Shurying was silent for a while and said calmly, "I will try my best." Lin Fengting looked at her. His eyes were calm and deep. Nalan Shurying stopped talking. Lin Fengting nodded and left the small laboratory. He didn't know if what he said was right, but if this was the truth, he could understand. Nalan Shurying, Team 002, and the body of the god of war were the sincerity of the Wang family of Beihai. Maybe it was not the so-called redemption, but they really wanted to protect themselves. Once Li Tianlan walked out of the desert prison, the development of Emperor Dong's palace would be unstoppable in a short time. If Li Tianlan went to the peak, the Wang family of Beihai could only bow their heads and compromise. Then the wounded lying here at this time would become the biggest obstacle between Emperor Dong's palace and the Wang family of Beihai. These sincerity were the means by which the Wang family of Beihai tried to weaken this obstacle. As for the process, the Wang family of Beihai could choose and even control it. Letting the wounded recover was a process. But in this case, even if she recovered, Li Tianlan might still have a grudge in his heart. What if he didn't let her recover but gave Li Tianlan enough hope? For example, time and procrastination. Letting her recover was tantamount to taking the initiative to compromise and handing the initiative to Li Tianlan. If he didn't let her recover and delayed indefinitely, it could let Li Tianlan see the hope of her recovery, which meant that the initiative was always in the hands of the Wang family of Beihai. Li Tianlan would compromise. He could only compromise. Lin Fengting's face was a little gloomy. If this was true, he could understand the motive of the Wang family of Beihai to do so, but he would not accept it. And the truth and falsehood between this was undoubtedly the most difficult to distinguish. He thought silently, closed the door, and came to the huge glass cover. Qin Weibai was standing there, looking up at the woman in the glass cover who was strong, powerful, glorious, but now could not control her own fate. She was in a daze. Lin Fengting stood there and watched for a long time, without moving. After a long time, in the almost frozen picture, Qin Weibai reached out her hand and gently knocked on the glass cover in front of her. She said slowly, "I know why you did this." Her voice was so soft that it was almost a whisper. "You ended everything and tried to escape what you always didn't want to face, because you were worried that Tianlan would hate you." She was silent for a long time, looking at the unresponsive woman inside, and whispered, "But have you ever thought that if you died like this, when Tianlan found out the truth, who would he hate? Would he hate himself?" Her slender white fingers pressed hard on the glass cover, and her whole palm turned pale because of excessive force. "I hope you can recover," she whispered. "Please." Chapter 739. At the beginning of winter in Yuzhou, Dongqing Wudi ended another meaningless parliamentary meeting and returned to the Bai family's manor in the cold temperature. It seemed that because of the season, the Bai family's manor was getting colder and colder. The large manor looked luxurious, but it was almost desolate. As the speaker of Yuzhou, Bai Zhanfeng rarely lived in the manor. Most of the time, he stayed in the first building of the council compound in Yuzhou. Bai Qingqian, who married Dongqing Wudi, either returned to Zhongyuan or Liaodong and rarely came back. Bai Qingqian's son and daughter were studying abroad, and his wife accompanied them to study all the year round. She rarely came home. Most of the time, Bai Qingqian lived alone in the manor in Qingshan, looking extremely lonely. For Bai Qingqian, in addition to his wife and son coming home from abroad, Dongqing Wudi's visit was the most desirable thing. Many years ago, Dongqing Wudi and Bai Qingqian were in love with each other. After they got married, Dongqing Wudi and his brother-in-law had a deep personal relationship. Over the years, the relationship between Bai Qingqian and Dongqing Wudi had become more and more rigid, which directly led to the growing rift between the Bai family and the Dongqing clan. Now Dongqing Wudi and his wife were gradually reconciled. Dongqing Wudi was transferred to Yuzhou from the Border Control Corps. Dongqing Wudi would come to the manor whenever he had something to do. One was the executive minister of the army headquarters, and the other was the deputy secret chief of the army headquarters. They would have a drink and talk about things that were inconvenient to say in the building of the army headquarters. The process was quite pleasant. Every time this happened, Bai Qingqian would cook a few simple dishes. When Dongqing Wudi walked into the living room, Bai Qingqian just put the last plate of shredded ear salad on the tea table in front of him. I tell you, old Lu from Liaodong brought me 2 bottles of wild ginseng wine when he came to the army headquarters last time. It's a great tonic. You should have 1 bottle, but I withheld it. Now I take it out, so it's not embezzlement. Bai Qingzhao said with a smile and took out 2 bottles of wine from the storage room on the side. In fact, there were 2 large jars, each of which weighed at least dozens of kilograms. Dongqing Wudi walked over, sniffed the fragrance of the wine in the air, and took a look at the jars. There were some wild ginseng and some other precious medicinal materials soaked in the jars, giving off a very mellow smell. Dongqing Wudi shook his head and said, "Old Lu needs to change his addiction to alcohol. Otherwise, with his qualifications, how could he be stuck in this position? If we delay any longer, we won't have another chance." Old Lu's full name was Lu Tingbo. He was a lieutenant general of Zhongzhou State, the deputy chief of staff of the Northern Theater of Operations, and also the commander of the Liaodong military. He was slightly younger than Dongqing Wudi and was Dongqing Wudi's absolute confidant. When Dongqing Wudi entered Yuzhou a few years ago, he originally wanted to push him up. A few months ago, when he traded with the Wang family of Beihai for the Border Control Corps, he also had this intention. But he tried twice in a row and failed in the end. There were many reasons, but his addiction to alcohol was also a more important one. I don't think so. Bai Qingzhao picked up an emerald spoon and scooped 20,000 bottles of wine. He shook his head and said, "At this time, plus old Lu's age, it's a victory for him to keep his current position for another term." Dongqing Wudi took a sip of wine sullenly, frowned, and said nothing. "The meeting didn't go well?" Bai Qingzhao asked. It had been nearly 4 months since Li Tianlan was imprisoned in the desert prison. Autumn had passed, and the cold winter enveloped Yuzhou. The atmosphere of the entire Yuzhou had become more and more depressing in 4 months. Bai Qingzhao couldn't remember how many council meetings had been held. The swords and sabers between the giants had almost filled the entire Zhongzhou state. The interior of the desert prison was still calm, but the entire Zhongzhou state had been really turbulent, and the situation was changing almost all the time. Today, Qi Baitsong was invited to attend the meeting. Dongqing Wudi was silent for a while, then said in a low voice. Bai Qingzhao suddenly raised his eyebrows, feeling a little surprised. Qi Baitsong was Qi Mulin's adoptive father, the top boss behind the Special Warfare Group, and the former minister of the army headquarters. It should have been a big deal that he was invited to attend the meeting of the giants. As the deputy secret minister of the army headquarters, it was impossible for Bai Qingzhao not to know the news. But in fact, he really didn't receive any notice. The task force. Bai Qingzhao gently tested the waters. "Humph." Dongqing Wudi snorted and said gloomily, "The reports are all the same. There is no concrete evidence. I suggest that Tianlan continue to be imprisoned." Bai Qingzhao nodded. This was a normal phenomenon. In fact, suggesting that Li Tianlan continue to be imprisoned was the protection of the giant group and the southeast group for him. This also meant that at least in the power configuration within the task force, the giant group and the southeast group had the advantage. At least in the suggestions that the task force had reported several times, there had been no suggestion to directly execute Li Tianlan. As the game went on, the investigation went on. The task force of the Mulan treason case had become more and more luxurious. Today, 4 months later, Dongqing Wudi personally served as the team leader of the task force. Gu Qianchuan, the first elder of Kunlun City, served as the executive deputy team leader. Yi Dongsheng, the deputy minister of the army headquarters and the chief of general staff, served as the deputy team leader. In fact, Yi Dongsheng was the leader in charge of the daily affairs of the task force. Everyone was confident about his ability. Bai Qingzhao looked at Dongqing Wudi in surprise. Things were still under control. Why did Dongqing Wudi look gloomy? Qi Baitsong suggested that Gu Chongjiang join the task force as the deputy team leader. Dongqing Wudi drank the wine and said quietly, "Zhou Yunhai expressed his support, and the meeting has passed." Gu Chongjiang was one of the backbone forces of Kunlun City. 2 months ago, he was officially appointed as the minister of the Southwest Special Warfare Headquarters of Zhongzhou State, at the same level as the councillors. Moreover, he got the ticket to enter the conference room at the plenary meeting held by Zhongzhou State last month. Wei Kunlun, the former minister of the Southwest Special Warfare Headquarters, was considered no longer suitable for this position. As for the reason, it was naturally very simple. Today, Wei Kunlun was not only the lord of Mount Shu but also the deputy palace master of Emperor Dong's palace. Such a figure could be described as a real towering tree with deep-rooted roots in the southwest. Tiannan and the southwest bordered. No one could rest assured that Wei Kunlun was put in this position. Regarding this appointment, even the 2 magnates of the Southeast Group expressed their support. But it didn't last long. Half a month ago, Fireman, who had woken up, was appointed as the minister of the Southeast Special Warfare Supervision Department and returned to Jiangxia. On the same day, Qingye of the Li family was appointed as the deputy minister of the Ministry of Security of Zhongzhou State, which was regarded as taking over the position left by Qi Mulan. The Southeast Group also expressed its support. With this advance and retreat, it could be seen that the balance that the 4 groups had tried to maintain was becoming more and more fragile. There was no doubt that Gu Chongjiang's entry into the task force was an aggressive move by the Prince Group and the academics. This proposal was put forward by Qi Baitsong. Obviously, during the time when Gu Xingyun was recuperating and silent, Qi Baitsong had already done the work of most people in the Special Warfare Group. They, who had been drifting away from the Prince Group, seemed to be getting closer to each other again. The tsunami-like pressure had become clearer and stronger with the faster and faster personnel appointments. Bai Qingzhao held the wine in his hand and thought about it seriously. Then he slowly shook his head and said, "It's okay. Yi Dongsheng can stand it." There was no doubt about Yi Dongsheng's ability, and none of the major groups would doubt it. As the god of army of Zhongzhou State, he was originally a powerful figure pushed by the Southeast Group to compete with Dongqing Wudi. At the most intense moment of the competition between the two, Yi Dongsheng's voice and recognition at the top were no worse than Dongqing Wudi's. A few years ago, if the giant group and the academics hadn't cooperated too firmly, even if Dongqing Wudi could take the position, the process would not be as simple as it was now. In order to stop Yi Dongsheng, the giant group was destined to pay more. Judging from the current situation, Dongqing Wudi was in the prime of his life, and the possibility of Yi Dongsheng going further was not very big. If there was no accident, the next giant candidates pushed by the Southeast Group should be Speaker Wen Siyuan of Beihai and Speaker Wang Qinglei of Wuyue. But it was basically no problem for Yi Dongsheng to continue to stay in this sensitive position for 1 or even 2 terms. How could such a figure, a reckless man like Gu Chongjiang, have any influence on him? Dongqing Wudi gritted his teeth and snorted. He seemed to want to get angry, but in the end, he became a little helpless. It's certain that Yi Dongsheng can control the task force, but the key is, can the Southeast Group and the Wang family of Beihai still stand it? They had been playing for 4 months. Could the Southeast Group and the Wang family of Beihai still stand it? It seemed that there was no need for any answer at all. But when Bai Qingzhao heard this sentence, he suddenly felt a chill in his heart. "What do you mean?" His expression became extremely serious. How can this kind of thing be up to them? They have to stand it even if they can't. That's true. Dongqing Wudi took a big gulp of wine and said sullenly, "But if they really can't stand it, what can they do?" He reached out and picked up a piece of tomato, but he did not put it in his mouth. Feeling the spiciness of the wine and the fragrance of medicine in his mouth, he was silent for a while and whispered, "Something happened in Jiangxia." Su Xinghe. Bai Qingzhao's body suddenly shook. Dongqing Wudi smiled bitterly and did not speak. Bai Qingzhao's face was a little uncertain. 3 months ago, the fall of Chang Wanxing, the deputy governor of Beihai province, marked the official attack of Zhongzhou state on Beihai, but no one took it seriously. Chang Wanxing fell and was taken away by the supervisory department of Beihai, which meant that the Wang family of Beihai still firmly controlled Beihai. Besides, Chang Wanxing was not a councillor of Beihai. He ranked low in the provincial government and could not be ignored, but it was not too important. 2 months ago, the Ministry of Personnel and the Supervisory Department of Zhongzhou State received a real name report from Jiangnan. Then the 2 major departments sent an inspection team to Jiangnan, the core position of the Southeast Group. Then a storm brewed in Jiangnan. In more than a month, the storm had become bigger and bigger. At present, more than 20 officials in Jiangnan had been involved. 5 days ago, a deputy governor in Jiangnan was directly taken down, removed from office, and investigated. It was not until this time that people realized that the academics and the prince group directly took action against Su Xinghe. Su Xinghe was now the speaker of Jiangxia, and before that, he was the governor of Jiangnan. In 5 days, it was obvious that someone had raised the issue of Su Xinghe at the board meeting that had just ended. Bai Qingzhao took a deep breath, and his heart was extremely turbulent. If this was the counterattack from the academics and the prince group, then no one had expected that the counterattack would be so fierce. They directly took action against the speaker of the province. Zhongzhou state had a territory of tens of millions of square kilometers and a population of more than 1 billion, but there were less than 40 speakers of the province. They were the real border conquerors, and they were also the most valued position by the parliament and the major groups. Even in the province, the weight of the governor was far less than that of the speaker. Such a position had always been the position that the major groups had fought for with all their might. Another meaning of fighting for it with all their might was naturally to protect it with all their might. The game had just begun, but they directly took action against such a figure, which meant that the game had entered a white-hot stage, and the danger had almost rushed directly to everyone's face with cold-killing intent. Could the Southeast Group withstand it? The Southeast Group and the Giant Group were in the honeymoon period of cooperation. What should the Giant Group's attitude be on this matter? Bai Qingzhao thought about it and suddenly froze. He glanced at Dongqing Wudi. Dongqing Wudi was also looking at him, and his eyes were extremely deep. Bai Qingzhao realized the key to this matter. How should the Giant Group take a stand on this matter? Obviously, the cause of this game was Li Tianlan's killing of Qi Mulin's family. Because of the special relationship with Tiannan, whether intentionally or unintentionally, Li Tianlan had become the heart of this game. The academics and the prince group both hoped to use Li Tianlan to establish their power and disintegrate Beihai province more smoothly. As long as they took down Li Tianlan, the parliament might find a reason to take down the speaker of Beihai. This touched the bottom line of the Wang family of Beihai. The speaker of Beihai had always been directly appointed by Mount Dibing. That was why the Giant Group and the Wang family of Beihai had joined hands. But now, the academics and the Giant Group had temporarily suppressed the matter of Li Tianlan and did not take a stand. Instead, they bypassed this matter and directly took action against Su Xinghe. What about the Giant Group? Support the Southeast Group? This matter, at least on the surface, had nothing to do with Li Tianlan. Once Dongqing Wudi came forward to support it, it meant that the two sides would join hands in more fields. This also meant that in the next game against the Wang family of Beihai, the Giant Group had already stood on the side of the Wang family of Beihai, so it would face more pressure from the parliament. This was undoubtedly the situation that the entire Giant Group did not want to see. They joined hands with the Southeast Group just to protect Li Tianlan, that was all. As for the next game and the disintegration of the Wang family of Beihai, Dongqing Wudi was actually on the side of the academics. After all, this matter was a good thing for Zhongzhou state. Dongqing Wudi's greatest support for Beihai was limited to not participating. It was impossible for him to join hands with the Wang family of Beihai. Su Xinghe's matter had nothing to do with Li Tianlan, so it was difficult for Dongqing Wudi to take a stand. But if he did not take a stand, it would form a huge crack in the cooperation between the two sides. The most important thing was that the academics and the prince group still did not take a stand on Li Tianlan's issue. But they took action against Su Xinghe, which gave the Giant Group another chance. Not to mention Li Tianlan. Zhou Yuanshan, the real leader of the next generation of the Giant Group, was now the governor of Jiangxia. If Su Xinghe fell, Zhou Yuanshan was likely to be the biggest beneficiary. And the key to this matter seemed to lie in how the giant group would choose. It's a dilemma. Bai Qingzhao glanced at Dongqing Wudi and suddenly asked, "What did Senior Zhou say?" Zhou Mulin was now also one of the directors. As the leader of the giant group and Dongqing Wudi's predecessor, the opinion of Zhou Mulin, who was about to retire, was undoubtedly crucial. He didn't say anything. Dongqing Wudi shook his head and frowned more tightly. Bai Qingzhao narrowed his eyes. He said nothing. Chapter 740. Dongqing Wudi could understand why Zhou Mulin said nothing. However, just because he could understand it didn't mean that he wouldn't feel troubled. In fact, no matter what group it was impossible for the internal structure to be monolithic. Where there were people, there would be politics. There would be different ideas and different demands. For a country, a president who could unify the different voices in the country was an outstanding president. For a group, a leader who could unify the different voices in the group was an outstanding leader. There were different groups in the country. There were different groups within the group. Balance and compromise were topics that could never be avoided if one wanted to have a common voice and allow a country or group to develop smoothly. Zhou Mulin was one of the veteran leaders of the giant group, but he was also Zhou Yuanshan's father. In such a sensitive situation, if Su Xinghe failed, Zhou Yuanshan was likely to reach the top in Jiangxia. He was trained as the next leader of the giant group. If Zhou Yuanshan, who was only 36 years old this year, could reach the top in Jiangxia in the following time, his huge age advantage could make him manage his team better and strive for the #1 position in 20 years. Zhou Mulin's term was less than 3 years away. At this time, if he could push Zhou Mulin up, he would definitely not hesitate. He had given Dongqing Wudi a lot of face by refraining from making a clear statement at the meeting. "Where's Dad?" Bai Qingzhao suddenly asked. After such a thing happened at the meeting, it was impossible for Bai Zhanfeng to return to the council yard in Yuzhou. This matter seemed to have nothing to do with the giant group, but it might be related to the future pattern of the giant group. Who could be careless? He's a guest in the Hidden Dragon Sea's 5th building. Dongqing Wudi took out a cigarette, lit it, and handed one to Bai Qingzhao. Bai Qingzhao was stunned and felt relieved. The 5th building in the Hidden Dragon Sea was called Cunning Pavilion, where Zhou Mulin lived. As one of the 9 directors, Dongqing Wudi naturally had a residence in the Hidden Dragon Sea. The 3rd building, Glowing Pavilion, was prepared for Dongqing Wudi. However, Dongqing Wudi spent most of his time in the army headquarters building and rarely went there. Bai Qingzhao pondered. As soon as the meeting ended, Bai Zhanfeng went to Zhou Mulin's place. It was extremely important for them to reach an agreement. Your attitude is also very important. Bai Qingzhao thought for a moment. What do you think about Su Xinghe? It's not easy for me to talk about this. Dongqing Wudi shook his head helplessly. It's hard to guess the president's attitude. If you don't speak, then the Southeast group. There will be problems. But if it's just once, it's not a big problem. As you said, the Wang family of Beihai has no way out. If they can't stand it, they have to stand it. I'm silent this time. Even if the Wang family of Beihai is dissatisfied, they won't say much. But the problem is, what about the future? Now they had bypassed the problem of Tianlan and started to attack the Southeast group. Su Xinghe was the first one. Who knew who the second one would be? If we continue to remain silent, then what is the so-called cooperation? Bai Qingzhao took a deep breath and muttered, if this continues, who knows how long it will take? If this matter is suppressed by Li Huaqing, his prestige will be damaged, but it can actually destroy our relationship with the Southeast. I don't know how many years Tianlan will have to stay in the desert. Dongqing Wudi did not speak. I have 2 suggestions. First, we must let the task force have some concrete evidence. Secondly, we have to find a way to test the president's attitude. He has the involvement of the academics, and they are plotting something big in this matter. There might be a chance. Bai Qingzhao said slowly, word by word. It's useless. Dongqing Wudi shook his head. The task force is a cover. How can we find evidence of Qi Mulin's treason? Even if there is, evidence isn't the deciding factor at the level of the parliament. The establishment of the task force is just a way for both sides to take a step back in order to save face. What about the president's attitude? Bai Qingzhao put out his cigarette. Dongqing Wudi's expression was a little gloomy. He pondered in silence for a long time before slowly saying, "If you were the president, what would you choose?" Bai Qingzhao was stunned. He did not quite understand. He subconsciously shook his head and said, "I don't know." He bypassed Tianlan and attacked Beihai. But it doesn't mean that he doesn't care about Tianlan and Emperor Dong's palace. In this way, his choices are limited. First, he was waiting for me to come to him. On the matter of Tianlan, he took a step back and announced that Qi Mulan had committed treason and Tianlan was innocent. We both reached a compromise and gave enough benefits to the academics. In this way, we, the Prince Group and the Academy will join hands to suppress the Southeast Group. The Wang family of Beihai will definitely lose. Bai Qingzhao glanced at Dongqing Wudi and waited for him to continue. Second, an indescribable brilliance flashed through Dongqing Wudi's eyes, and his voice became a little low. Second, we take down Su Xinghe and let Yuan Shan take the position. He will come to us on his own initiative and promise to fully support Yuan Shan in the next 20 years to let him take that position. As for the conditions, he twitched the corner of his mouth and said coldly, "We give up Tianlan." Bai Qingzhao sucked in a breath of cold air and stood up abruptly, almost knocking over the tea table. The wine in the small celadone bowl shook violently and spilled out. Fully support Zhou Yuanshan and give up Li Tianlan. Li Huaqing's choice was infinitely magnified in Bai Qingzhao's mind in an instant. If he chose this proposal, he would not talk to Dongqing Wudi at all. He would go directly to Zhou Mulan. Zhou Mulan originally wanted to support Li Tianlan, but obviously he was more willing to support his son. If Li Huaqing promised to support Zhou Yuanshan and asked Zhou Mulan to give up Li Tianlan, in Zhou Mulan's eyes, Li Tianlan would become a stumbling block for Zhou Yuanshan. What would he choose? Bai Qingzhao paced back and forth, suddenly turned around, gritted his teeth and said, "Why don't we just support Su Xinghe?" Su Xinghe didn't stand upright and was caught by others. How can we support him? He will definitely leave Jiangxia. It's just a matter of time. If we support Su Xinghe, Yuan Shan definitely can't go up. The new speaker of Jiangxia won't even be from the southeast. Once the people from the academy or the prince group go to Jiangxia, the situation in Jiangxia will be more complicated. If something goes wrong in Jiangxia, Ning Qianqing can't do anything alone in Tiannan. If we want to survive, we can only deepen the cooperation with the southeast group, which means that we have to play with the prince group and the academics for Beihai. If we lose, what's the benefit if we win? Dongqing Wudi's voice became more and more dull. Bai Qingzhao stopped talking. In the fight within the rules, there would always be some traps. Although he knew it was a trap, he had to get caught in it and couldn't find any way out. At this time, compromise and concession were the only things he could do in the trap. But the key was that in this trap, the giant group didn't even have many choices to compromise. As for giving up Li Tianlan, there was no option. Without this option, the giant group was now trapped. Bai Qingzhao really didn't expect that the counterattack of the academics and the prince group would be so fierce. This time, the giant group was almost pushed to the corner. Damn it, this move is really vicious. Bai Qingzhao gritted his teeth and couldn't help but swear. Not really. I just took advantage of the situation. Dongqing Wudi waved his hand. At first, they didn't expect that we would cooperate with the Southeast Group so quickly, so they set up the task force and sent Tianlan to the desert. Now they come back to their senses and make a move. Naturally, they are well prepared. Su Xinghe is difficult. Is there no way at all? Bai Qingzhao didn't want to give up. No. Dongqing Wudi shook his head. He suddenly hesitated and said, "There is no effective way, but there are some things that we can try." Where is the entry point? Bai Qingzhao asked. It's on the president. Dongqing Wudi took a deep breath and suddenly said, "I'm going to inspect the Beihai Corps in the near future. It's time to have a good talk with Summer Solstice. If the Wang family of Beihai can put down its pride, this matter may turn around." I still don't quite understand. Bai Qingzhao's eyes were a little blank. The president. Dongqing Wudi said slowly, "He doesn't have much time." Bai Qingzhao lowered his head and thought for a long time. Then he said with some uncertainty, "You mean you want to support the president?" No, it's not the right time. It's too early." "It's not too early." An old voice suddenly sounded at the door. Bai Zhanfeng, the chairman of Yuzhou, walked in and said blandly, "The matter about Su Xinghe won't come to a conclusion in a short time. If we can delay this period of time, we can almost take action." Dad. Bai Qingzhao and Dongqing Wudi stood up at the same time. Bai Zhanfeng waved his hand and motioned for them to sit down. In terms of position, Dongqing Wudi was a director and could be said to be the leader of Bai Zhanfeng, a member of parliament. But at home, as a father-in-law, Bai Zhanfeng was naturally the most powerful. "Invincible is the right idea," Bai Zhanfeng said slowly. "In this regard, Qing Zhao is still a little worse. No matter how many times I say it, he is still a little worse. It's a matter of structure. In this regard, even Yuan Shan is much better than you." Bai Qing Zhao coughed dryly and felt a little embarrassed. He was now a general of Zhongzhou State and the deputy secretary-general of the army headquarters. But at home he was the father. Bai Zhanfeng had always said that he was not good at structure and was even inferior to his sister Bai Qingqian. He had heard this many times. The opponent's move this time is very powerful. If you can't resist it, don't resist it. It's better to see what you can do to fight back. Bai Zhanfeng took a sip of wine and sighed. In any case, in politics, the initiative is the most important. You can't be led by the nose. That way, you can't achieve anything. They want to deal with the Southeast Group and Tianlan. If you can't stop them, let them do it. If you can't stop them, don't do it. The best way is for them to fight their own battles, and we will fight ours. If you can't resist the opponent's attack, you will definitely lose. If you can't resist it, then change the direction according to your own ideas and fight for the initiative. Only in this way can you have a chance to turn defeat into victory. Bai Qingzhao was silent for a long time before he bowed slightly and said respectfully, "Father, you're right." Bai Zhanfeng did not speak and ate silently. A lot of things happened tonight, and he needed to think carefully. "Dad, do you think my method is feasible?" Dongqing Wudi asked seriously. "It's necessary to try, and the probability of success is not low. No matter who it is, no matter what position it is, there are some things that can't be let go. Since it's a weakness, it can be used." Bai Zhanfeng said lightly. "It's just that in this way, the Wang family of Beihai will lose face, and even many plans will be greatly affected. Their future direction will be adjusted because of this." Bai Qingzhao felt a little emotional. Throughout the history of Zhongzhou State, in hundreds of years, it was not enough for the Wang family of Beihai to bow down and bow down. How many times had they taken the initiative to slap themselves in the face? This was even the first time. This is inevitable. In this case, how can they not make some concessions? As for the future direction, they are qualified to adjust the direction after they lose face. I'm afraid that Summer Solstice and even Wang Tianzong have been looking forward to this opportunity to lose face for a long time. This is not a bad thing for them. Dongqing Wudi laughed. "This is not good for us." Bai Qingzhao cautiously said, "Yi Dongsheng, hey, it's hard to deal with." Bai Zhanfeng shook his head and sighed softly, but he did not speak. He had said what he should say. What else could he say? In terms of personal ability, vision, and even quality in all aspects, Bai Qingzhao was at least the best. Bai Zhanfeng had always had expectations for his son, but Bai Qingzhao had always been slightly flawed in terms of breadth of mind. He cared too much about immediate gains and losses and lacked some spirit of looking down on the world. Bai Zhanfeng had tried hard for this, but he did not get any good response. On the contrary, his daughter Bai Qingqian was graceful and generous. Although she was a woman, Bai Zhanfeng was very satisfied with her, which could barely make up for his regret. Yuan Shan did a good job tonight. Bai Zhanfeng was silent for a while and spoke softly, with undisguised appreciation in his tone. "Yuan Shan?" Dongqing Wudi was stunned. "Did he come to Yuzhou?" "No, but he called the Hidden Dragon Sea directly. I guess he will call you soon." Bai Zhanfeng laughed softly, and the appreciation in his eyes became more and more obvious. Soon after the meeting, Zhou Yuanshan called Zhou Mulin directly and explained some of his views in detail on the phone. Between father and son, there were many thorough words. He was Zhou Mulin's son, and he did his father's ideological work for his own future. His identity was more useful than anyone else. The phone call lasted for nearly 40 minutes. Bai Zhanfeng had been waiting on the side. It could be seen that Zhou Mulin was greatly touched. After hanging up the phone, he naturally told Bai Zhanfeng what to say. Zhou Yuanshan's second call was to Ji Wanzhong, a councillor of Zhongzhou State and the minister of the Ministry of Supervision. In the face of the leader of the Wang family of Beihai, Zhou Yuanshan, as the governor of Jiangxia, was not polite at all. He might not be furious, but his words were extremely fierce. On the phone, he even asked whether the parliament believed in Jiangxia or not. Ji Wanzhong was directly contradicted, but he was not unhappy at all. Zhou Yuanshan's attitude was undoubtedly what he needed most. The problem in Jiangnan was getting bigger and bigger. There were already voices in the Ministry of Supervision that an inspection team would be sent to Jiangxia. Zhou Yuanshan's call could be said to have helped him a lot and relieved his pressure to a considerable extent. Zhou Yuanshan's third call was directly to President Li Huaqing. He said openly and secretly that Jiangxia needed stability. He was the successor of the giant group. At this time, his attitude of protecting Su Xinghe was extremely clear and firm. Such a move had too many unusual meanings, especially when the relationship between Zhou Yuanshan and Su Xinghe was not harmonious. Zhou Yuanshan's righteous words, regardless of the immediate gains and losses, were bound to be unanimously recognized by a considerable part of the Southeast Group's forces. After Ji Wanzhong hung up the phone, he called Zhou Mulin and praised Zhou Yuanshan greatly. It could also be seen that the Southeast Group's attitude toward Zhou Yuanshan's call could also be seen. Bai Zhanfeng smiled. At this point in time, there was still a long way to go before 20 years later. It was too early to say that there would be a struggle between the giants in the future, and even earlier to say that there would be a presidential struggle in the future. If the competition between the dazzling next generation like Wang Jingxin and Zhou Yuanshan was not obvious before then, after tonight's call, Zhou Yuanshan had clearly taken a half-step ahead. Dongqing Wudi poured a small bowl of wine for Bai Zhanfeng. Bai Zhanfeng picked it up and put it to his mouth, but did not drink it. He was silent for a long time before he said again, "Yuanshan is good." "It's too early to talk about this," Dongqing Wudi said with a smile. Bai Zhanfeng glanced at him and nodded. He understood what Dongqing Wudi meant. If Summer Solstice was really willing to lose face and Li Huaqing's attitude was lax, the Wang family of Beihai was bound to adjust its direction after it survived the current crisis. At that time, Wang Jingxin would become more important in the sequence of the Southeast Group, and the competition with Zhou Yuanshan in the future would become more and more fierce. What would happen in the future was still uncertain. But it was really too early to talk about this now. "Tianlan has to suffer a little," Bai Zhanfeng said softly. "That boy doesn't feel wronged. I think he's a little too happy in the desert. Xiao Mahai's mind is in a mess all day long. He even took his daughter and sister to prison. I don't know what he wants to do. I'll beat him later." Dongqing Wudi snorted. The corners of Bai Zhanfeng's and Bai Qingzhao's mouths twitched at the same time, showing a smile. "He's determined to ride on Tianlan's coattails. He can't care about your face now, Minister Dongqing." Dongqing Wudi shook his head, feeling a little speechless. His cell phone suddenly rang. Dongqing Wudi took out his cell phone and glanced at it. His eyes suddenly froze. It was a call from the building of the army headquarters. Did something happen at this time? He frowned and pressed the answer button. The person on the other end of the phone reported something. Dongqing Wudi's face suddenly darkened and became extremely ugly, even a little angry. "I'll be right there," he said and hung up the phone directly. "What's wrong?" Bai Qingzhao asked. "It's a meeting of the army headquarters. Come with me." Dongqing Wudi took a deep breath, but he smiled bitterly in his heart. If the capture of a deputy governor of Beihai was a tentative move by the academics and the Prince Group, then the other side had exposed their real intentions by pointing their sword at Su Xinghe. Dongqing Wudi finally saw the other side's third move under great pressure. Only then did he understand that this was a combination of the other side's moves. It was turbulent, fierce, majestic, and powerful. He had expected the other side's counterattack, but he had never thought that the other side's counterattack would be so fierce. It was early winter on December 1st in Zhongzhou State. When Jiangxia was in a state of turmoil and people in Jiangnan were in a state of panic, the academics and the Prince Group, which had not been silent at all, made a move again. It was also mixed with the power from the Southeast Group, which could not be concealed at all. On this cold night, An application from Beihai appeared directly in the building of the army headquarters. Jiang Hongwei, a member of the Parliament of Zhongzhou State, the Marshal of the Army Headquarters of Zhongzhou State, and the Commander of the Border Control Corps, codenamed Di Jiang, applied to resign as a member of the Parliament of Zhongzhou State, Marshal, and the Commander of the Border Control Corps. A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. Chapter 741. Before and after the Spring Festival, Dongqing Wudi flew around the major theaters of operations in Zhongzhou State almost every day. On behalf of the Parliament, the Cabinet, and the Army Headquarters, he visited the soldiers and officers who still stuck to their posts during the Spring Festival. Bai Qingqian was also busy with official business in Liaodong. The couple who had made an appointment with Li Tianlan to spend the new year with him in the desert could only put this matter aside for the time being and change it to the Lantern Festival together. This year, as Dongqing Qiuqi and Zhou Yuanshan got into high positions, they became busier and busier. Dongqing Rushi was in a coma, so the Dongqing clan was extremely quiet. The relationship between Dongqing Hongguang and his brother Dongqing Honjian was not harmonious. Although they didn't live far away, they didn't want to spend the new year with each other, so they came to the Bai family in Yuzhou. During this sensitive period, Dongqing Hongguang, the former standing minister of the army headquarters of Zhongzhou State, spent the Spring Festival in the Bai family, which naturally aroused countless speculations. Countless people thought that this was the voice of the giant group's strong integration in the group to cope with the increasingly severe situation. Therefore, the high-level officials of the Prince Group and the academics had met several times in private to discuss countermeasures. Although Dongqing Hongguang had retired for several years, his identity as a founding member of Zhongzhou State had not changed at all. Not to mention within the giant group, even in the other 5 groups, there were old subordinates of Dongqing Hongguang. Now most of them were in high positions or had just retired. Such an old man's influence was extremely great. His every possible targeted action was enough to make everyone feel like they were facing a formidable enemy. These high-ranking officials seemed to have no idea that Dongqing Hongguang came to Yuzhou just because of the loneliness of an old man in his old age. His son, daughter-in-law, granddaughter, grandson-in-law, adopted son, and grandson were all gone. His old friend, who used to come to drink and play chess with him every spring festival in the past, also died in the rain in Lin, and a few months ago. Some were dead, some were busy, some were imprisoned, and some were in a coma. This year was extremely tortuous for Dongqing Hongguang. Because of his internal distress, the old man, who was once all-powerful on the highest stage of Zhongzhou State, almost became much older in the shortest time. It seemed that only when he came to Yuzhou and faced Bai Zhanfeng, an old friend who should have retired long ago but was still strong, could he calm down a little. The 14th day of the first month. In the afternoon. Dongqing Hongguang and Bai Zhanfeng sat in the pavilion of the manor, silently looking at the chessboard in front of them, lost in thought. Invincible can't come? Wudi can't come? Yeah, he said that he's a little busy, and something came up at the last minute. He just came out of the Eastern War Zone, and he's going to return to the Chinese server. Qing Qian is already waiting for him there. Dongqing Hongguang's tone was a little low. Tonight's dinner is just us 2 old guys again. Dongqing Hongguang said in a low. Bai Zhanfeng shook his head helplessly. Dongqing Hongguang had made it clear that Bai Qingqian was waiting for him in Zhongyuan, which meant that Bai Qingqian would not come back until Dongqing Wudi came back. Dongqing Hongguang's eyes flashed, and he said thoughtfully, Wudi is going to Hanga Pass. Half Wudi Festival Pass. There was a flash of surprise in Bai Zhanfeng's eyes. As the largest military family in Zhongzhou State, Dongqing Wudi had a classified weapons research institute near Hanga Pass. Bai Zhanfeng knew this very well. Moreover, Dongqing Wujin, the leader in the field of individual weapons and metal alloys in China, almost stayed in that weapons research institute all the time. The falling stars that Li Tianlan had used were also made by Dongqing Wujin. If that's the case, Endless has made a new discovery? But it's not right. Qing Qian won't follow him. So this new discovery probably has nothing to do with Zhongzhou State. Dongqing Hongguang narrowed his eyes. He remembered about half a year ago. At that time, Li Tianlan was put in the desert prison. Dongqing Wudi took the Shen Yuan sword out of the prison and gave it to Qin Weibai. At that time, Qin Weibai hadn't gone abroad yet. She went directly from Yuzhou to Zhongzhou and asked Dongqing Hongguang to meet Dongqing Wujin. That day, Qin Weibai took a few boxes with her. Dongqing Hongguang didn't know what she said to Dongqing Wujin, but when she left, the boxes in her hands were gone. After that, Dongqing Wujin went directly to the Military Research Institute near Hanga Pass, and there was no news from him until now. He thought silently, picked up a chess piece and said slowly, "It should be a good thing." Bai Zhanfeng thought for a moment, nodded seriously, and put down the chess piece in his hand. "I won." Dongqing Hongguang looked down at it. The black and white intertwined on the dense chessboard had long become an extremely complex pattern. As Bai Zhanfeng put down the chess piece, the 5 white characters on the chessboard had been slanted into a line. "Good move." Dongqing Hongguang thought for a long time, then nodded and said, "Let's start again." When the plane landed in the Secret Research Institute near Hanga Pass, night had fallen. A black car with a local license plate was parked next to the helicopter. Bai Qingqian stood in front of the car, smiling at Dongqing Wudi who walked out of the cabin. Her eyes were gentle and quiet. It took a long time for the Eastern Theater of Operations. "I'm late." Dongqing Wudi held his wife's hand. In the cold weather, her palm was a little cold. "It's okay. I just arrived." Bai Qingqian said softly, "Why did Big Brother call us here?" "He just said that there was something very important about Tianlan. It should be about the Shenyuan sword." Dongqing Wudi didn't delay anything. He took Bai Qingqian to the gate of the base. "A few months ago, I gave the Shenyuan sword to Qin Weibai, and Qin Weibai gave it to Big Brother. Today, Big Brother called us here. Did you make any progress? Why did you give the Shenyuan sword to Big Brother?" Bai Qingqian was a little curious. "I don't know." Dongqing Wudi shook his head. "Since then, Big Brother has been staying here, cutting off contact with the outside world. It was not until a few hours ago that he contacted me for the first time." Under the night sky, a thin figure was standing in front of the door of a small villa that looked a little shabby. Seeing Dongqing Wudi and his wife coming over, he took a step forward, nodded, and said somewhat dully, "Wudi, Qingqian, here you are." "Big Brother." Dongqing Wudi nodded, his eyes a little strange. "How did you end up like this?" Dongqing Wujin smiled. In fact, although the relationship between Dongqing Hongguang and Dongqing Hanjian was tense, there was not much interest dispute. Dongqing Hanjian looked down on Dongqing Hongguang, but Dongqing Hanjian was very good to Dongqing Wudi. Therefore, the relationship between the two old men's descendants was very strong, and there was nothing strange about it. "Hey!" Dongqing Wujin smiled, a little complacent. In a few months, he seemed to have lost a lot of weight. He used to be a serious scholar, but now he was dirty all over. His beard seemed to have not been shaved for a long time, and he looked a little sloppy. But an unprecedented spirit gathered in his eyes, making him look extremely excited. "Come with me." Dongqing Wujin directly grabbed Dongqing Wudi's arm and dragged him inside. As he walked, he said, "I'll show you something incredible." Dongqing Wudi was helplessly dragged away. Dongqing Wujin's speed was getting faster and faster. In desperation, Dongqing Wudi simply reached out and held Bai Qingqian's still light body in his arms. Bai Qingqian blushed and gently hammered Dongqing Wudi, but did not refute anything. Dongqing Wudi giggled, and his eyes were a little dazed. Dongqing Wujin did not notice the abnormality behind him at all. He took the two of them into the elevator excitedly. It seemed that because he was too excited, he entered the familiar password twice in a row. Dongqing Wudi was shocked. This secret research base could be said to be one of the most important bases of the Dongqing clan, and its security measures were extremely strict. Once the password was entered incorrectly for the third time, the elevator would self-destruct, and the whole base would explode at the same time. He did not want such an important base to be destroyed because of Dongqing Wujin's excitement. He quickly entered the password, then looked at Dongqing Wujin, who was so happy and unconscious, and asked helplessly, "Which floor?" "The second floor underground," Dongqing Wudi said with a smile. Dongqing Wudi pressed the button. As the elevator descended, he said helplessly, "What on earth can make you so excited?" Dongqing Wujin rubbed his hands and became more and more excited. "I successfully dismantled the murderous weapon and recorded most of its data." "Murderous weapon?" Dongqing Wudi was suddenly shocked. "Which one?" "Not this one." Dongqing Wujin shook his head. "Blue sky underworld, falling stars, twilight of the gods, and void divine light." He stretched out 4 fingers and smiled proudly. I dismantled 4 murderous weapons. Cough, cough, cough. Dongqing Wudi seemed to be choked by his saliva all at once. He coughed violently, and his face turned red. 4 murderous weapons. Yes, 4. Dismantled. Dismantled. When can you restore it? Why restore it? It has been dismantled, and it can't be restored. It was dismantled thoroughly. The elevator stopped. Dongqing Wudi, whose face was cloudy, stood in the elevator and stared blankly at Dongqing Wujin, whose face was glowing. So, the elevator door opened and closed. Dongqing Wudi did not dare to move for a moment. He looked at Dongqing Wujin and said expectantly, "So, big brother, now that you have analyzed the data of the murderous weapon, can you mass-produce murderous weapons?" "That can't be done." Dongqing Wujin shook his head honestly. "The murderous weapon is a very special energy source, and there is no way to copy it. But after recording most of the data, I can improve some existing firearms, such as Sky Attack. Before Sky Attack, it was very powerful. It can hit the target directly within a distance of 300 meters, and even kill a thunder-shocking realm expert. What about after the improvement? Can it threaten an invincible realm expert?" Dongqing Wudi asked eagerly. Dongqing Wudi looked at him as if he were an idiot and shook his head. "How is it possible?" He smiled and was a little proud. "But after the improvement, the limit distance of Sky Attack has increased. It can increase by dozens of meters. If it hits the target within 350 meters, it can also kill a thunder-shocking realm expert." There was silence. Dongqing Wudi waited patiently for a while. But Dongqing Wujin had finished. He really finished. "Just a little more distance?" Dongqing Wudi asked incredulously. "Although the distance has increased by dozens of meters, it's very important, okay?" Dongqing Wujin was a little dissatisfied. Dongqing Wudi's heart shook violently. Of course, he knew that the distance of dozens of meters was very important, especially when shooting at a thunder-shocking realm expert. The distance of dozens of meters could almost be said to be the line of life and death. But 4 murderous weapons. Dongqing Wudi dismantled 4 valuable murderous weapons just to add a little distance to a standard piece of equipment? You prodigal! Our 4 murderous weapons. Blue Sky Underworld, Falling Stars, Twilight of the Gods, Divine Light of Void. 2 came from Li Tianlan and the Samsara Palace, and the other 2 were the spoils of the Samsara Palace in Eastern Europe. 4 murderous weapons. Where are the 4 murderous weapons? Dongqing Wujin shook his head and said seriously, "There are no more. To be exact, there will be no more 4 murderous weapons in the dark world in the future." Dongqing Wudi's body trembled. At this moment, he really wanted to kneel down. "The 4 murderous weapons. No, the pile of parts that you dismantled. Where are they now?" Dongqing Wujin glanced at him and was silent for a moment. Then he said, "They were eaten." I% yin yin yin. Dongqing Wudi's expression was distorted. For a moment, all his movements seemed to be frozen. Dongqing Wujin's voice continued to ring in the opening and closing of the elevator. They were all eaten by the Shenyuan sword. Chapter 742. The Shenyuan sword ate the murderous weapons. This was Dongqing Wudi's first reaction. The Shenyuan sword ate 4 murderous weapons. 4 murderous weapons. Dongqing Wudi, who completely realized what had happened, trembled all over and couldn't believe it. For hundreds of years, murderous weapons had always been national treasures, almost related to the fate of the country. Any country and any superpower regarded them as treasures. What did a murderous weapon mean? In the state of energy storage, each murderous weapon had a powerful destructive power that could directly threaten the life and death of an invincible realm expert. In other words, a murderous weapon almost meant an invincible realm expert who was in a special state and could only attack once in a period of time. And it was not an ordinary invincible realm expert. How about Gu Xingyun? Known as the god of war of Zhongzhou state, his real strength was the top in the entire dark world. He ranked 5th on the divine list and was infinitely close to the peak of the invincible realm. In the face of the close-range firing of Sunset, one of the 12 murderous weapons that ranked in the lower middle and lower reaches, he almost died. Such great power could be said to be the most important trump card anywhere. After the chaos in Eastern Europe, with the death of a large number of invincible realm experts, the two murderous weapons that originally belonged to the Men in Black and the Heroes Club fell directly into Li Tianlan's hands. With the disappearance of the Samsara Palace, Blue Sky Underworld also fell into Li Tianlan's hands. Plus falling stars. For these four murderous weapons, Zhongzhou State even held high-level council meetings more than once. It was no exaggeration to say that once these four murderous weapons finished the energy storage process, Zhongzhou State would be more powerful in the entire Dark World. Because of this, Star State and the Heroes Club would negotiate with Zhongzhou State through different channels, trying to get back the Void Divine Light and the Twilight of the Gods. Of course, they would not give them to him, but Zhongzhou State was still discussing how to use them. After Li Tianlan swept the entire Beihai province, the parliament seemed to suddenly realize that these were Li Tianlan's trophies, so the topic was temporarily suppressed. But after all, Li Tianlan was still a man of Zhongzhou State. The four murderous weapons were in his hands, which meant that they were in the hands of Zhongzhou State. But now, four murderous weapons. Were they eaten? Dongqing Wudi's heart collapsed, and the expression on his face suddenly became extremely complicated. He seemed to want to cry, but also wanted to laugh. All kinds of emotions, such as heartache and confusion, emerged all at once. It was as if he had countless personalities in an instant. Dongqing Wujin walked out of the elevator and looked back at Dongqing Wudi. His eyes were full of fanaticism. It was Boss Qin and Tianlan's idea, and I completed their commission. The Shenyuan sword ate the four murderous weapons. I fulfilled it and it fulfilled me. I can be sure that the Shenyuan sword will become the #1 famous sword throughout the ages. If it is not a cold weapon, it can also be said to be the strongest single weapon for at least several hundred years in the future. Whether in terms of lethality or range, it is almost unsurpassable. A sword that was truly at the pinnacle. Bai Qingqian held Dongqing Wudi's hand hard and whispered, "Are you all right? I think it's very good." In this way, Tianlan is more important, and the Shenyuan sword is more important. Dongqing Wudi took a deep breath. No matter how much his heart ached for the four murderous weapons, the fact was that he had to accept them. However, he could well imagine what kind of uproar this news would cause once it was reported to the parliament. This matter would undoubtedly bring many unpredictable factors to the game that had already begun, which might be good or bad. The specific outcome would depend on the skill and strength of the two parties in the game. He strode out of the elevator and followed Dongqing Wujin to an alloy door. Dongqing Wujin entered the password, and the door slowly opened. Bright light spilled in, and a research room full of futuristic style and science fiction appeared in front of the three of them. Under the bright light, countless screens were on. Some were playing pictures and some were full of data. One test bench after another, whose specific functions Dongqing Wudi did not know, was neatly arranged. Dongqing Wudi glanced at it. He vaguely remembered that this floor could be said to be the forging platform of the research institute. Some new alloys, as well as the barrels of some firearms and the engines of some advanced equipment, were developed here. Today's machines had obviously been updated in a short period of time, and their functions had become more powerful. The couple followed Dongqing Wujin all the way forward, and finally saw the Shenyuan sword in the center of the research room, which had eaten the four murderous weapons. Dongqing Wudi stared at the sword in front of him, dumbfounded. This was a completely unforgettable scene for him. The blade of the Shenyuan sword was inserted into the ground, and the hilt almost broke the ceiling of the entire research room. Today, the blade of the Shenyuan sword was almost 20 meters long and 5 or 6 meters wide, which looked like a hill. On the enlarged two sides of the blade, the carvings of the sun, the moon, the stars, and the mountains, rivers, lakes, and seas were completely alive at this time, looking extremely profound. With this scale, it was not a sword at all. This size could even catch up with some small fighter jets. The Shenyuan sword stood there silently, but at this time, it did not feel cold, but a kind of quietness. This feeling was extremely weird. When Dongqing Wudi looked at the sword, he could clearly feel that the sword was also silently observing him. Dongqing Wudi frowned, walked to the front of the Shenyuan sword, and reached out to touch the huge blade. In front of the Shenyuan sword, his figure was like an ant. The moment the two sides touched, Dongqing Wudi clearly perceived a hidden majestic sword energy. This kind of power was endless, like the vast sky, like a vast ocean. Dongqing Wudi took a deep breath. He was also a master of swordsmanship in the half-step invincible realm, but when he felt the sword intent, he did not even have the slightest desire to resist. "Good sword," he said softly, with a little force in his palm. The mountain-like blade of the Shenyuan sword trembled slightly, and silently moved a few centimeters to the side, out of Dongqing Wudi's palm. Dongqing Wudi was a little stunned. "It's a little unhappy." Dongqing Wujin laughed and said, "Obviously, it doesn't want anyone else to touch its body, except Tianlan." Dongqing Wudi curled his lips, reached out his hand, and slapped the huge blade. "It's just a broken sword. Why is it so pretentious? I'm its father." Buzz! The huge blade of the Shenyuan sword trembled, with a loud buzzing sound. At this moment, almost everyone could clearly feel its annoyance and dissatisfaction. Dongqing Wudi hit it with another punch. So the air was instantly quiet. The Shenyuan sword moved back silently. "Tut tut." Dongqing Wudi was a little surprised. "It's really a spirit. To be exact, it's a different kind of life from us." Dongqing Wujin said calmly, "Do you remember the origin of the murderous weapon?" Dongqing Wudi's eyes flickered. The origin of the murderous weapon. In the beginning, the murderous weapon was called the life metal. It was a trophy obtained by the Wang family of Beihai and the first god of war of Zhongzhou state after they defeated a formidable enemy. About this, it had always been the top secret of Zhongzhou state. The only thing that was certain was that the huge piece of metal could indeed be called a kind of life, because it could clearly express some simple emotions and tendencies. Zhongzhou state had studied it for hundreds of years, and even divided it into countless pieces, regardless of its opposition, to study its components, and made great progress in some fields. But later, because of an accident or necessity, a large number of life metal left the laboratory and even left Zhongzhou state. That was how the 13 murderous weapons of the Dark World came into being. More than 20 years ago, the endless sky collapsed, and only 12 of the 13 murderous weapons were left. If all the metals were gathered together and returned to their origin, then it could indeed be regarded as a life, but not a human being. Life? Dongqing Wudi muttered to himself and shook his head. To be precise, they have a kind of energy source inside them. This strange metal is just a carrier of this energy. They can absorb this energy, and when they absorb it to a certain extent, they can emit a kind of shockingly destructive ray. It has super-penetrating power and super-strong coverage. Zhongzhou state has not figured out what the energy they absorb is and what kind of attribute it has. At present, making them into murderous weapons is the only way, and it is also the simplest, most primitive and most basic way to use them. Dongqing Wujin said slowly, "If we can analyze this energy and make full use of it, we may be able to change countless fields in the world." "Big brother, do you have a way to further use this energy?" Dongqing Wudi's eyes lit up. "Not really. I can only say that it's an improvement." Dongqing Wujin shook his head. "The source of the life metal is unknown. The most credible theory is that it should be a meteorite from outer space. Research materials are limited, so it's unlikely for us to make full use of them. However, when analyzing the Shenyuan sword, we found that part of the material of the Shenyuan sword is very similar to that of a murderous weapon. It can even be said that the Shenyuan sword is a murderous weapon, but the energy it contains is far more than that of other murderous weapons. Once the two kinds of energy meet, it is almost instinctive to devour each other. So the Shenyuan sword has devoured all the energy of the 4 murderous weapons in the past few months. I went to Mormon's in person and found a way to improve it from the traces of destruction at the scene." "What way?" Dongqing Wudi asked. Dongqing Wujin hesitated and shook his head. "At present, our research on the life metal is still a little limited. I'm not sure about some things. But judging from some traces of destruction at Mormon's, if the sword light at that time is regarded as a blow from a murderous weapon, then the power of that sword can be said to be several times that of an ordinary murderous weapon. It is said that the Shenyuan sword is the core of a sword formation. There are 13 floors and 13 swords. At present, I can't analyze the composition of the other 12 swords, but it is certain that if the 13 floors are regarded as a murderous weapon and that sword is regarded as a blow from a murderous weapon, then it will take at least more than 20 years to accumulate energy. I can't study all their secrets for the time being, so I can only make up for its shortcomings in another way." Dongqing Wudi looked at Dongqing Wujin with a serious look in his eyes. Dongqing Wujin nodded. "So I let the Shenyuan sword devour 4 murderous weapons. Its power should not have increased, but the speed of energy accumulation has doubled. In such a short time, you have achieved such results. Dongqing Wudi shook his head. In fact, I didn't do anything. The devouring is the behavior of the Shenyuan sword. The idea was given to me by Boss Qin. Dongqing Wujin said calmly, according to what Boss Qin said, I think so far, I have completed the task to the greatest extent. This sword may be the key to Tianlan's breakthrough into the invincible realm. Chapter 743. Dongqing Wudi quietly looked at the mountain-like Shenyuan sword and remained silent for a long time. The key to Li Tianlan's breakthrough to the invincible realm. If it was really on this sword, no matter how the council viewed it, at least he could completely accept it. At this stage, whether Li Tianlan entered the invincible realm or not was completely different. Judging from the strength he showed now, many people were speculating that as long as Li Tianlan entered the invincible realm, he might not need to stabilize his realm, and his combat capability could reach the peak of the invincible realm. The peak of the invincible realm. Today, in the whole world, there was no one at the peak of the invincible realm in a normal state. What this meant for Zhongzhou state was self-evident. As for the 4 murderous weapons, it was not wrong or right to exchange 4 murderous weapons for the first divine sword throughout the ages. It was just a matter of choice. The huge body of Shenyuan's sword trembled slightly. Dongqing Wudi glanced at Dongqing Wujin and said softly, Can I take it to the desert now? Wait a little longer. Dongqing Wujin shook his head, hesitated, and said slowly, Now in theory, this sword can go to the desert by itself. Dongqing Wudi was speechless for a moment. A sword to go to the desert by itself? Hangu Pass was thousands of miles away from the desert. What did that mean? He didn't ask. He just blinked and said slowly, What are we waiting for? For the final fusion. Dongqing Wujin said calmly, Shenyuan's sword swallowed 4 murderous weapons, and the internal energy is a little conflicting. Look here. He turned and pointed to a huge screen beside him. Countless complex and fine lines appeared on the screen, and rows of data flashed up like running water, dazzling people. Dongqing Wudi and Bai Qingqian looked at it silently, as if they were reading a book from heaven. At present, the size of Shenyuan's sword is its limit state. In the process of swallowing murderous weapons, this state is irreversible. Dongqing Wujin operated the instrument and showed a progress bar. The progress bar had reached 99.57%. Just a little bit more, and it can completely merge with the murderous weapons. At that time, Shenyuan's sword can return to its original state, 3 to 5 centimeters long. Then you can take it to the desert. The last point, will there be any accidents? Bai Qingqian suddenly felt a little nervous, and her dignified face was obviously concerned. I won't. Dongqing Wujin said affirmatively, all accidents have been ruled out. In the past few months, we have done a lot of experiments and calculations. This fusion is perfect. There will be no problems. The Shenyuan sword had begun to shrink. The progress bar, which had almost reached the end, moved forward bit by bit. The 3 of them stopped talking and waited in silence. Switzerland. Worry-free manner. Biology laboratory. My stats have reached the peak. I can now complete the final step of fusion and inject the body of the war god. A large amount of body data flowed continuously on the screen. On another screen, the data representing the cell activity was also tumbling. After leaving Switzerland for Tiannan, Nayland Shuriying, who would return here almost every once in a while, stared at the screen. When most of the data reached the peak, she didn't hesitate and spoke directly. Confirm command. Lin Fingyue's calm voice came from the other end of the communicator. Order 223, inject the last drop of the war god's body, double the nutrient fluid, and seal the nourishment chamber. Nayland Shuriying said lightly. Understood. Lin Fengyue nodded and responded. Nayland Shuriying operated the test bench in front of her expressionlessly. The picture switched, and the picture of the nourishment chamber appeared on the screen. Countless nutrient fluids similar to bubbles were tumbling in the nourishment chamber, and the nourishment chamber lit up with a red light. For a few months, the injection of half of the war god's body, 1 drop at a time, would officially end today. Nayland Shuriying didn't know what the result would be, so she could only wait. Zhongzhou State. Miaojiang. Under the dim sky, a gentle and calm figure slowly walked into a small village in the deep mountains in the night. There was no light in the village. Under the cover of the night, every household lit up a faint candlelight. Several dark-skinned but extremely sturdy children were playing on the uneven streets. When they saw an outsider walking in, they all stopped curiously. It was dilapidated, barren, and almost absolutely closed. The outsider stood at the entrance of the village and looked around for a while, as if to make sure that he was not in the wrong place. An old man walked out of his house and saw a stranger standing at the entrance of the village. He was stunned and suddenly became a little vigilant. He took 2 steps forward and said warily in a dialect with a strong accent, "Who are you looking for?" In the night, the outsider's whole body was covered in a shabby coat from head to toe. When he heard the question, he put his palms together and bent down slightly. As he moved, the coat that covered his head slid backward, and a bald head with a ring scar appeared in the night. "I'm looking for the Goo King." His voice was gentle and calm, neither fast nor slow. He turned out to be a monk. The old man at the entrance of the village was stunned and immediately let down all his vigilance, even with a little respect. He trotted to the monk, carefully identified him and then stammered, "Ru, Master Ruzhin? My Dharma name is Rui." A touch of sadness flashed in the monk's eyes, and he said softly, "Senior brother Ruzhin has passed away." The old man didn't understand the meaning of passing away, but it could be seen that he was very happy and danced. "Old man, please take me to see the Goo King." Rui's voice was gentle. The old man nodded happily, took the monk to a dilapidated hut in the middle of the village, and said something in a hurry. Rui waited quietly. The next moment, the door of the hut was pushed open, and a very tall middle-aged man bent down and walked out of the door. Rui put his palms together and bowed deeply. "What's the matter, master?" The current Goo King looked at Rui with some expectation in his eyes. "I'm here to get a flower by my master's order," Rui said softly. The Goo King was stunned and said softly, "Great Master Wu Wei." Rui put his palms together and said nothing. The Goo King was silent for a long time, and then he said sadly, "Master?" He shook his head hard, cheered himself up and said softly, "What flower did Master Rui come here to get?" "The fate of the mortal world." Rui's voice was calm. King of venomous worms' breathing became rapid. He looked at Rui seriously. He nodded and said solemnly, "Please." Rui stepped into the hut. There was a small table in the center of the hut, and a clay pot was placed in the middle of the table. In the faint candlelight, a delicate tender branch was blooming in the clay pot, swaying slightly with the candlelight. A few months ago, this flower bloomed. "I knew the master would come." "Master, you're late." The Goo King looked at the flower quietly, and his eyes were in a trance. Rui didn't say anything. A few months ago, when the flower bloomed, it should be that eternal. The moment when Heng's sword illuminated the sky above Mormon's. It was also the moment when all the flowers in Mormon's manor fell. He looked at the flower, and the candlelight illuminated his bald head, which was a little weird. "This belongs to Great Master Wu Wei. Master, please take it away." The Goo King continued to speak. Rui turned his head and looked at the Goo King seriously, saying softly, "Do you know what this means?" "Master, you said it back then, but I don't regret it." The Goo King shook his head with a smile. "The Miaojiang wizard clan was almost exterminated. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't have been able to keep this small village. I'm the Goo King, and I'm also a sinner. This is my redemption. Master, I hope that when you take away the fate of the mortal world, you can also give our wizard clan a chance to survive." Rui nodded and said softly, "Don't worry, Goo King. There will be opportunities soon. They will live a good life in the future." The Goo King was silent for a moment, then walked over and carefully dug out the little flower. He said in a low voice, "That's the best." Zhongzhou State. Golden Autumn Pavilion. Hidden Dragon Sea. Li Huaqing put down the documents at hand, looked at the night outside the window, pondered for a while, and then pressed the call button on the table. A young secretary came in and said respectfully, "President, inform Minister Yi Dongsheng and ask him to come here. I have some questions to communicate with him." Li Huaqing said softly. "Okay." The secretary nodded and turned to leave. Li Huaqing made himself a cup of strong tea, came to the window, and looked up at the night sky. There was no dazzling light in the hidden dragon sea, and the night sky was clear. There were few stars in the winter sky, which was extremely deep. Li Huaqing looked at it quietly, and his eyes were extremely high. A faint stream of light cut through the sky and disappeared in a flash. Li Huaqing didn't care. Another meteor streaked across the sky. Dazzling meteors appeared one after another, and more of them appeared. The night sky seemed to be deeper. The meteors kept appearing, like rain. Beihai, Mount Dibbing, stage of formidable person. The wind was howling, and the sea was howling. It had begun to snow in Mount Dibbing. In the silver-white world, Summer Solstice stood quietly in front of the stone of formidable person, gently stroking the stone that had experienced the vicissitudes of life. In more than half a year, the pressure that she hadn't felt for many years had gradually begun to pile up on her. Summer Solstice suddenly found that she was not as strong as she had imagined. Whenever she felt that she couldn't bear the burden, she would come here alone and look at the names on the stone of formidable person. They were all the history of the Wang family of Beihai. There seemed to be a kind of power that could support her to go on. She finally understood why Wang Tianzong liked to come here. In the shrill wind, she stroked the rough stone with her palm, and her expression gradually became firm and majestic. Crack, crack. In the fine sound, the silver moon sword that had been inserted above the stone of formidable person suddenly began to tremble. Summer Solstice suddenly raised her head. Under the curtain of night, the blade of the silver moon sword, which was still bright and cold, kept trembling. The snow kept falling from the sky. However, one after another, faint lights streaked across the sky. Those were meteors. The meteors fell into Beihai like rain. Europe, the Holy Land. When the mysterious His Majesty walked out of the Holy Land and entered the land of Atalos, he was still followed by his follower, Mellad. But now Mellad's identity had changed in essence. No one knew what His Majesty and the Pope had discussed, but the follower could clearly sense that His Majesty's footsteps were becoming more and more powerful. They had endured for so many years. From this moment on, they seemed to have risen. The Pope's will would be conveyed to the whole dark world as soon as possible. Mellad, the former deputy commander of the Holy Disarmament Corps, would serve as the commander of the Holy Disarmament Corps and also serve as the Grand Knight of Knights Templars. Mellad naturally knew what that meant. During the period of silence of the Shadow Throne, the whole of Europe would be in His Majesty's hands. Congratulations, Your Majesty. Mellad's voice was respectful and fanatical. Ha! His Majesty smiled and said, "This is just the beginning." Yuzhou. In the sanatorium that was heavily guarded, a saint dressed in black slowly walked into a ward. In the quiet ward, countless instruments were running and making sounds from time to time. On the bed in the center, a woman in white was lying quietly on it, motionless. She was Li Shi, the wife of the city lord of Kunlun City. Half a year had passed since the chaos in Eastern Europe. Li Shi was transferred from the private hospital of the giant group to the current sanatorium. Saint was personally in charge here, and no one dared to make trouble. Even Kunlun City had not expressed its opinion on the current situation. They seemed to have completely forgotten the existence of Li Shi, and they were completely indifferent to her situation. For half a year, Li Shi was still sleeping, and there was no sign of waking up. Saint looked at her silently and suddenly waved his hand. The seemingly ordinary space continued to fluctuate as he waved his hand, and it spread out, revealing a small domain. Xian Xuanzi, who was still dressed in a Taoist robe, walked out of Saint's domain. Looking at his daughter lying on the bed, his eyes were a little sad. Basically, her injury has been stabilized. It's only a matter of time before she wakes up. It won't be a big problem. Don't worry. Saint's voice was stable and peaceful. The Samsara Palace was gone, and most of the 12 supermasters had fallen. But on the eve of its destruction, Xian Xuanzi, who joined the Samsara Palace, was still the 13th supermaster, and he was really on the same side as Saint. If he wanted to see his unconscious daughter, Saint would naturally help him. That's good, that's good. Xian Xuanzi muttered to himself, but he didn't know what to say. He gazed kindly at his daughter's sleeping face. After a long time he whispered, "Let's go." He turned and walked to the door. The domain was opened again and enveloped him. Xian Xuanzi came to the balcony outside the ward and looked at the starry sky. He was silent and a little sad. "What's your next plan?" Saint stood beside him and lit a cigarette. "I'm going to find a monk and get a flower." Xian Xuanzi whispered, "This is the last thing I'll do. I'll wake up the palace master. It's time for me to retire." "Palace master? Can she really wake up?" Saint said in a complicated tone. "She can definitely wake up." Xian Xuanzi said faintly, "Luck, God's design, her own fate and years of hard work all determine that she can't die." "Luck? God's design?" Saint chuckled and shook his head. "You cannot believe it, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Surreal things also exist in reality. Many things can't be explained. Most of what I've learned are things you don't believe in." "You don't believe in this, but can you say that it doesn't exist?" Xian Xuanzi asked. Saint was silent. There were too many things about metaphysics grandmasters like Great Master Wu Wei and Xian Xuanzi that couldn't be explained. But it didn't mean that it didn't exist. For example, Li Tianlan's resurrection. "What is God's design?" Saint asked. Xian Xuanzi thought for a while and suddenly pointed to the sky. "Look, for example." He suddenly stopped breathing. Saint looked up at the sky and narrowed his eyes. The night sky seemed to suddenly become extremely gorgeous. Countless glimmers burned and fell from the sky, endless, spectacular and beautiful. "For example, what?" Saint looked at the meteor shower in the sky and asked slowly. Xian Xuanzi didn't speak. His whole face suddenly twisted, his arms trembled violently, and his eyes suddenly became extremely frightened. In the base, the Xian Yuan sword, which had been shrinking, finally became that delicate and perfect black sword again. Dongqing Wujin smiled with joy. "Finally I made it. Boom!" The sudden roar drowned all of Dongqing Wujin's voice in an instant. The Xian Yuan sword suspended in the air suddenly burst out an unparalleled strong light, and the whole sword body expanded again. The wild sword energy surged out, filling the entire space of the research room like a wave. Dongqing Wudi, whose face changed greatly, directly protected Dongqing Wujin and Bai Qingqian and retreated quickly. The sword light became brighter and brighter, constantly expanding in the laboratory. Without hesitation, Dongqing Wudi directly left the research room, knocked open the elevator, and rushed out of the ground. The next moment, a strong light appeared over the entire Hanga Pass. The strong light penetrated the ground and went straight into the sky. An earth-shattering explosion suddenly sounded. The Xian Yuan sword rushed out. The entire research base of the Dongqing clan turned into ruins in an instant. The Xian Yuan sword, which was as huge as a mountain, shrank and grew bigger. Somehow, there seemed to be a sigh, which was extremely complicated. "What's going on?" Dongqing Wujin's voice was filled with disbelief. Dongqing Wudi frowned and was about to speak. Puff! Bai Qingqian's body suddenly went limp, and a large mouthful of blood sprayed directly from her mouth. Forgotten City. With a final injection of the body of the god of war, a large amount of nutrient solution had completely drowned the figure in the nutrition chamber. Qin Wei Bai stood in front of the nutrition chamber, looking at the faint voice. Her eyes were shining, and her whole person became erratic and strange. "I know you can hear me." Her ethereal yet penetrating voice rang out. "Even if you can't hear anything, you can still hear my voice, right?" The nutrient solution was extremely calm. But in an angle that no one could see, the figure wrapped in the nutrient solution seemed to move its eyebrows unconsciously. "Comrade Dongsheng, please sit down." Looking at Yi Dongsheng, who walked into his office, Li Huaqing turned around from the window and said with a smile. Yi Dongsheng sat down with a smile and opened his mouth to say something. Li Huaqing said, "What did you say?" Yi Dongsheng was stunned and repeated it again. Li Huaqing's eyes were a little dazed. He could see Yi Dongsheng's mouth moving, but at this moment, he suddenly couldn't hear the voice. The office in front of him was spinning. The meteor outside the window seemed to fall into his eyes. He tried to smile, and his body shook and fell directly in the office. The misty brilliance kept shining in the sky. The blade of the silver moon became brighter and brighter, and the violent vibration almost caused the whole stone of formidable person to tremble. Summer solstice was just about to move, but her whole body suddenly shook. In her body, which she was not aware of, countless vitality seemed to rush out without warning. The remaining vitality in the immortality potion she had taken was suddenly stimulated to the extreme, and a large amount of vitality was constantly repairing the internal injuries in her body. Her foundation, which had been damaged for many years, was almost recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye, and her whole breath was becoming stronger and stronger. His Majesty suddenly stopped and looked around. It was daytime in Italos, and the warm sun shone on the street. His Majesty's body suddenly began to tremble. "Your Majesty, what's wrong?" Mellad asked subconsciously. His Majesty's body trembled. After a long silence, he said in a hoarse voice, "I don't know, but I suddenly feel very bad." He paused and said in a heavier voice, "No, it's very bad." Desert prison. In the dormitory of Shao Mahai, Li Tianlan was meditating on the large and soft bed. His injury had almost completely healed in a few months of recuperation, and his state had also reached the peak. He became more and more focused in the state of meditation. Without any warning, he suddenly opened his eyes. It was a vast expanse of whiteness. The luxurious dormitory had completely disappeared in front of him. He did not know when the hazy fog had completely filled the room. The fog was misty and more, constantly emerging from his body. It was the dragon vein that he carried. But suddenly, it seemed to be completely out of control, completely out of Li Tianlan's control. Li Tianlan was startled and subconsciously tried to stand up. But as soon as he moved, he suddenly lost his balance and fell to the ground. An unprecedented weakness completely enveloped him. In the white fog, his body had almost turned into nothingness. Only the vast white fog kept gushing out, more and more, covering everything. The whole dormitory became pure white. Yuzhou. Xian Xuanzi's body was stiff, and his palm was still pointing to the sky. There were more and more meteors in the sky, densely packed. Thousands of them appeared in the night sky, with incomparably dazzling brilliance. Xian Xuanzi's eyes became more and more frightened. Meteor shower? He knew that it was not. He was sure that it was not a meteor shower. In his eyes, the glimmering lights represented the fate of boundless vitality. They streaked across the sky and stirred up everything, turning all the order in the dark into a complete mess. It was impossible to speculate. The fate of countless people was completely scattered. It was as if there were countless forks in the road, densely packed like a maze. Xian Xuanzi opened his mouth. He wanted to say something, but as soon as he opened his mouth, he spat out a large mouthful of blood. Not only his mouth, but also his eyes, ears, and nostrils were full of blood. In the blink of an eye, a large amount of blood had dyed his Taoist robe red, making him look like a bloody man. It suddenly began to snow in Yuzhou City. In the sky full of stars, snowflakes kept falling. It was a heavy snowfall. Xian Xuanzi's body shook and fell. Dongqing Wudi held his body and said in a serious tone, "What's going on?" "Cough, cough." Xian Xuanzi coughed, and every time he coughed, a lot of blood foam came out. His voice was hoarse. "Heaven's secret." In the voice that was getting weaker and weaker, he opened his mouth with great difficulty. "Heaven's secret is messed up, the fate of the country. Messed up. Karma. Messed up. Divine Emperor of 9 Heavens." Chapter 744. On the 15th day of the first lunar month, it snowed heavily in Lin, N. The heavy snow fell from late at night to early in the morning, getting heavier and heavier. The world was silvery white, and the water of the West Lake became clearer. Snow was not common in Lin N, and the West Lake in the snow was even more magnificent. When the snow covered the world, countless citizens had come to the West Lake to play, and the atmosphere was relaxed and leisurely. 2 men, who seemed to be shrouded in clouds and mist, walked quietly in the crowd, calm and indifferent. Walking in front was a young man who seemed to be in his 30s. Under the flying snow in the crowd, he was like a very eye-catching lighthouse, constantly attracting the attention of everyone around him. The young man seemed to be unaware of it. He just raised his head and looked at the snowflakes in the air in a trance. No one could see his appearance clearly, but almost everyone's eyes around him were firmly attracted by him. It was an indescribable feeling, like the flying snow in the air, the breeze in the morning, the moonlight at night, and the sunset at dusk. Cold, indifferent, perfect, and quiet. He was so quiet that he was almost old. This was unparalleled perfection and elegance. Although no one could see his appearance clearly, everyone who saw him could be sure that this was a perfect man, ethereal and dreamy. The young girls on the West Lake summoned up their courage and came over almost in waves. Even if they couldn't get his contact information, it was good to talk to such a man, but no one could get within 3 meters of him. The young man was silent. The man who followed him with a respectful face stood up to stop them when necessary, like the most dutiful bodyguard. Strictly speaking, the bodyguard was also a rarely seen handsome man. He was 1.9 meters tall and of mixed Eurasian descent. His posture was straight and his appearance was extremely handsome. However, his aura was too gloomy and cold. With a sweep of his eyes that were like cold stars, most of the girls who were rushing over were so scared that they stopped in their tracks. More and more young women rushed over, almost never stopping. Most of them could be stopped by the bodyguard with his eyes, but there were always a small number of strong women who would not be frightened. Whenever this happened, the bodyguard would quickly step forward 2 steps and block the girls who rushed over. He did not speak and just moved forward. He repeated this process over and over again, without the slightest impatience. Gradually, there were more and more women behind them, and the scale was getting more and more spectacular, forming a very unique scenery on the West Lake. The bodyguard seemed to be a little impatient. The corner of his mouth moved and he said hoarsely, "Your Majesty, should I kill these reckless women?" The man who had been watching the snowflakes in a daze shook his head and chuckled. "Forget it." His voice was calm, indifferent, and magnetic. The two walked to the shore and stood under a willow tree. Suddenly the young man said, "Your Majesty, this is the first time. My master took me away from here when I was a child, and this is the first time for me to come back. It's been more than 30 years. The bodyguard, who had an incomparably cold and dangerous aura, was unusually docile beside the young man. Upon hearing his words, he bowed slightly and whispered, "Your Majesty, do you want to go to the broken bridge to enjoy the snow? Of the West Lake of the mountain." Of. Is day. Of lake. Of time of day. Of world. Of. World of day of. Of day of day. The crowd around them was noisy. Countless young women following behind the two of them did not leave. Their scorching gazes landed on the young man's back. "Azura." The young man suddenly spoke. "Your Majesty." The bodyguard took a step forward and bowed slightly. "There are too many people here. It's annoying," the young man said. Azura nodded. "I understand." He stepped back, picked up the phone, dialed a number, and whispered something. Vaguely, the words "Your Majesty" and "Dynasty" could be heard, but they were soon drowned out by the fog. In less than 5 minutes, Azura returned to the young man's side and whispered, "The army has set off, and the speaker of Zhangzhou will come soon. West Lake will soon be cleared. The speaker just communicated with the Parliament of Zhongzhou State and agreed in principle to give West Lake to Your Majesty. From today on, West Lake will not be open to the public, but the specific construction needs to be taken over by the people of the dynasty. Your Majesty, what style do you want?" "Let's go to the cemetery." The young man thought for a while and said slowly. Shura's body stiffened. He was a little surprised, but then he nodded. "Okay." He suppressed the surprise in his heart. It seemed that he no longer felt that there was anything strange about transforming West Lake, a scenic spot of world civilization, into a cemetery. "This is a cemetery. Aunt and uncle are here, and so is my brother. They don't like to be disturbed." The young man said faintly, "Azura, you arrange this matter." "Okay, Your Majesty." Azura nodded. "What are you talking about?" A soft and elegant voice suddenly sounded. Azura took 2 steps back. A beautiful woman whose age could not be judged came over with a bouquet of flowers and a quiet smile. The woman's clothes were very simple. She wore a black coat, trousers, and flat shoes. Her black hair was tied into a ponytail. Her face was without any makeup. She was as clear and light as the beautiful West Lake in front of her. She carefully took care of the flowers in her arms. Looking at the young man in front of her, her calm eyes contained countless complicated emotions. "I want this lake." The young man pointed to the lake in front of him. His voice came out of the dense fog. "It's very good here." "It's very good." "Is it going to be transformed into the second carefree city? If Grandpa Lin comes back, he should like it here very much." The woman smiled. The young man was silent for a while and shook his head with a smile. Master, he told me some time ago that he had seen the carefree city for a lifetime and was tired of it. After a while, he also planned to travel around the world. I want to make this a cemetery. Aunt and uncle will sleep here so that they will not be disturbed. The woman was slightly stunned and smiled, but her smile became a little sad. Well, it's also very good. I just don't know if my parents and my brother will like it. They will like it. The young man said softly, I have talked with Zhongzhou State. When I come back this time, I will also move the remains of my parents here. A subtle mist spread over and wrapped the woman and Azura. The world seemed to be motionless. But the next second, the three had left the shore, crossed the clear lake, and came to a hill. Two dilapidated tombstones appeared in front of the three. The woman's hand holding the flowers trembled slightly. She whispered, That's even better. If uncle and aunt come, my parents will not be lonely. I hope so. The young man nodded. I hope aunt and uncle don't hate my mother. We are sorry for them. The woman reached out and touched the young man's hair. She said softly, No, we are a family. Really? The young man looked at the flying snow in front of him. Cousin, do you hate her? My mother. Do you hate her? No. The woman whispered, I may not have liked her before, but when I see you, I don't hate her anymore. When my parents see uncle, they won't hate aunt. We are a family. And grandpa and grandma, grandma and grandpa, the young man muttered to himself. The dense mist dissipated around him. A perfectly chiseled face appeared in the air. His expression was still calm, but a trace of blood gradually appeared in the corner of his eyes. Azura. He suddenly opened his mouth and called out, Your Majesty. Azura took a step forward. You have cleaned my grave for 10 years. Do you know who you are cleaning for? His Majesty's voice was a little cold. It's for the family of your Majesty. Azura said hesitantly. His Majesty nodded, reached out to touch the dilapidated tombstone in front of him, and said blandly, My aunt and uncle are lying here. The grave next to it is my brother's. The one standing beside me now is the chief administrator of the dynasty, my cousin, the daughter of my aunt and uncle. Azura's body trembled, and he lowered his head, not daring to look up. This was originally a big family that stood at the peak of Zhongzhou State. Azura, why is it like this? His Majesty whispered to himself in a confused tone. Azura's body trembled more and more severely. With a thud, he knelt on the ground, still not daring to speak. At this moment, he was not a super expert who was famous in the dark world and was about to break through the peak of the invincible realm. He was just an ordinary person who did not know what to do in fear and trepidation. Because of my father. His Majesty smiled softly. Do you know that my father was the heavenly son of that era? Everyone thought that he could lead the family to a new height. He unconsciously stroked the tombstone with his palm and whispered, just when he was closest to success, he failed. My grandfather. His voice was still calm, but the temperature between heaven and earth was getting lower and lower. He was the most famous marshal in Zhongzhou State back then, and even the most famous marshal in the world. He fought hundreds of battles in his life and never failed. No marshal in the world was his opponent. He was a hero all his life. The day after my father failed and died, he took a military plane from the border to Yuzhou, but he died in an air crash. His body has not been found until now. Azura's body crawled down and he did not dare to move. These things might have nothing to do with him, but His Majesty was obviously in a bad mood now. In the past few years, more than one invincible realm expert had died in His Majesty's anger, including an expert at the peak of the invincible realm. Although he was His Majesty's henchman, he did not dare to be too relaxed at this time. My grandmother could have become a member of parliament in Zhongzhou State. As soon as the news of my father's death came, the news of my grandfather's death came. Hey, she quarreled with my grandfather for many years because of my father. After the news came, she vomited blood and fell into a coma. When she woke up, she went completely crazy and died in a mental hospital in the spring of the next year. My uncle was the speaker of Jiangxia. After my grandfather's funeral, he was hit by a car and died on the road as soon as he left the scene. The wind stopped. In an instant, the flying snow tens of thousands of meters above the entire West Lake froze in the air. The extreme coldness spread out with the hill as the center. The army that was ready to clear the West Lake had not arrived yet. The tourists by the West Lake rushed home in a hurry in the extreme cold. My aunt was reported for corruption and bribery. Everything that was reported was unreliable, but some people believed it. She sent my cousin to a friend's house and was thrown into prison. When she was sent to prison, she was 8 months pregnant. My brother was born in prison. On the second day of his birth, it was said that all the bones in his body were crushed. How old was the child? Ha 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 ha, he cried in prison all day. All day. My aunt knelt down and begged the prison guards to let her take the child to the hospital, but no one paid attention to her. On the night my brother died, my aunt also died in prison. The woman in front of the tombstone put down the flowers and covered her mouth, not daring to cry out loud. Maybe there was another aunt. I don't know if she counted. After my father's accident, she jumped from the highest building in Huiting. Her body was long gone. Do you know what happened next? Later, my mother found my cousin and hid me and my cousin, and then... Oh, sorry, I shouldn't have said this. Azura, do you know the reason for all of this? It's the death of your Majesty's father, Azura said in a hoarse voice. He didn't dare not answer. It's true. His Majesty nodded. Do you know why my father died? Azura really didn't dare to answer this time. He naturally knew the answer. Almost everyone in the Dark World knew it. But since the establishment of the dynasty, no one dared to talk about this topic. Those who dared to talk about it were all dead. His Majesty said it himself, because when my father was closest to success, my mother killed him. For me. She killed my father and put the whole family beyond redemption. That silly woman. Later she gave birth to me and found my cousin. It seemed that she accompanied me for a while, but I don't remember. Then, she went to find someone to avenge my father. Well, she was the murderer. She took away my father's sword and almost killed most of the people related to my father's death. She herself also died with the enemy in the final battle. During that time, my cousin and I stayed alone in Huiting. My cousin was only 5 or 6 years old at that time. She had to find some clean food for me to eat when she went out to pick up garbage. At that time, we were like 2 stray dogs that could be pinched to death at any time. Later, my master looked for us for a long time before he took us back to the City of Happiness in Switzerland. So many years have passed. The Dark World has been talking about that year, and I have also been studying that year. Many times I want to ask why. If someone or someone could have mercy, the whole situation would not have been like this. But there were too few people involved in that year. Until a few days ago, I met the Emperor of Huawu. My sword was on his neck, and I asked him why. Do you know how he answered? His Majesty laughed. He said it didn't matter. Because it's not important, I slashed him more than 3,000 times with my sword. I also killed his entire family of 14 and his 3,000 cherry blossom guards. Since he doesn't think that what happened in the past is important, then what I do now shouldn't matter. It really doesn't matter. His Majesty muttered to himself like a calm madman. After all, no matter what I do, those who deserve to die are those who don't deserve to die. He patted the tombstone. They're all dead. But is it over? His Majesty turned around and looked at Azura kneeling in front of him. Tell me, Azura, is it over? Of course it's not over. Azura suddenly raised his head, his eyes blood-red. And the Wang family of Beihai. I just received the news that Shao Tian has officially destroyed the Shenwu Corps in Africa and destroyed all the industries of the Wang family of Beihai in Africa. In addition, 3 hours ago, Jing Zhe led the Holy Disarmament Corps to officially attack the headquarters of the Rothschild family and began to clean up all the allies of the Wang family of Beihai in Europe. The woman's eyes were calm and tough. In less than 2 months, everything the Wang family of Beihai has done around the world will become history. Only Beihai province can be preserved. Azura, Shao Tian, Jing Zhe. They were the 3 experts at the peak of the invincible realm in the dynasty, and they were the 3 experts who were close to breaking through. There was only one such expert in the Wang family of Beihai, and he was in a very special state. The woman suddenly wanted to appreciate the desperate expression of the hostess of the Wang family of Beihai at this time. I don't allow Beihai province to continue to exist. His Majesty was silent for a while and said slowly. But the current president of Zhongzhou State has a very close relationship with the Wang family of Beihai, and Senior Lin. The woman hesitated. I'll talk to Master. His Majesty said blandly. As for the president, he has no time. When he retires, I'll let the Wang family of Beihai and the 7 sword-holding families kill everyone. The woman's eyes lit up slightly. Azura's face turned red, and his face was full of ferocious killing intent. Let the Wang family of Beihai kill everyone. A few days ago, there might be people who questioned the authenticity of this sentence. But now, when the whole dark world was trembling under the sword of the dynasty, no one dared to question all this. The reason for this change was not because of the 3 experts at the peak of the invincible realm in the dynasty. It was because of His Majesty in front of him. His Majesty was invincible. In one day, he traveled thousands of miles and killed 14 emperors at the peak of the invincible realm, but he himself had no supreme power. Several figures appeared on the path at the foot of the mountain. A small group of well-dressed people, who were no longer young, stood on the mountain road. They were a little hesitant and seemed to be afraid to come up. Is it the speaker of Jiangxia? His Majesty raised his eyebrows. I'll go and have a look. The woman smiled and turned to go down the mountain. The speaker of Jiangxia immediately smiled, trotted over, and bowed repeatedly. Hello, hello. I'm the speaker of Jiangxia. Hello. The woman nodded indifferently. What's the matter? I heard that His Majesty is here, so I came to see what you need. The speaker wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and asked softly. We don't need it, and we'll leave right away. Mr. President, if there's nothing else, please go back. His Majesty is in a bad mood and doesn't want to see guests. Who are you? Don't forget, the one standing here is Mr. President of Jiangxia. A young secretary asked loudly. Who the hell are you people? The speaker's face changed dramatically. He seemed to be stunned and didn't know what to say for a moment. The woman raised her eyebrows slightly and said blandly, My name is Dong Qingyu, the CEO of the Sword Dynasty. If I don't understand it, there will be explanations in 2 or 3 chapters. I especially like to write these messy things. I'm poisoned. Chapter 745. Sword Dynasty. Dong Qingyu. The speaker's legs felt weak. In recent years, there might be people in the dark world who didn't know who the president of Zhongzhou State was. But there was no one who hadn't heard of Dong Qingyu. She was the Princess Royal of Sword Dynasty, the chief administrator, and the cousin of His Majesty. Most of the time, she took care of all the affairs of the dynasty for His Majesty. Her status was even higher than that of the 3 experts at the peak of the invincible realm. In the dynasty, when His Majesty's will was silent, Dong Qingyu's will was the will of the entire Sword Dynasty. He had just been promoted and transferred to Jiangxia not long ago. Before that, he was not even qualified to meet Dong Qingyu. Jiangxia was the enemy of the rise of His Majesty's father. When the dynasty was so powerful, the fact that the speaker could come to Wuyue had already explained a lot of problems. Although the Zhongzhou State Parliament was his organization officially, putting aside those superficial things, from the standpoint of the group, Dong Qingyu could be said to be his immediate superior's immediate superior. The speaker didn't expect that his newly elected secretary would have the guts to offend Dong Qingyu. This wasn't loyalty at all. It was stupidity. The chairman's mind was in a mess for a moment. Before he could speak, the secretary mumbled subconsciously, What the hell is the Sword Dynasty? Swish! The frozen snow in the air suddenly fell. The speaker felt dizzy. He didn't even feel that he was moving. However, all the people he brought here crossed the mountain road and came to the 2 old tombstones. A calm and indifferent gaze that looked kind but actually had no warmth fell on him. The perfect face of a man appeared in front of the speaker. The speaker felt dizzy for a moment. His Majesty's voice rang out slowly. Sword Dynasty is mine. Plop. The speaker's knees went weak. He knelt on the ground. His face was pale and his voice trembled. Your Majesty. He was the speaker of Jiangxia. In the entire Zhongzhou state, he was a bigwig with a high position and power. He should not be so spineless. However, the person he was facing now really had an irresistible power in today's world situation. Sword Dynasty. The strongest power in the dark world. Or, it was the only power in the dark world. Being the only one meant that everything would be unified. It was a dynasty that really occupied the dark world and affected the world's structure. In one day, he traveled thousands of miles, traveled to 6 European countries, and killed 14 experts at the peak of the invincible realm. The heavenly Emperor Huawu, who was a half-step heavenly talent, the holy war angel of the Vatican, the Queen of Shadows of the Throne of Shadows. For many years, the names that had shone in the dark world were dim. The superior of the invincible realm was killed by his sword. They were all ants. But the dark world did not wither. Instead, it became more and more glorious. Countless rays of light had gathered on His Majesty. His martial arts were matchless, and his radiance was boundless. He was not a great man. Tyrant, dictator, arrogant, cold-blooded, ruthless, cruel, crazy, suspicious, temperamental, bloodthirsty. Almost all the negative words could be used on him. Even some of his own people couldn't find any point to refute. Except for Dong Cheng, he didn't trust anyone. In the 11 years since the establishment of the Sword Dynasty, there had been 9 masters of the Invincible Realm and 3 at the peak of the Invincible Realm, excluding His Majesty. There were only 6 Invincible Realm experts left in the Sword Dynasty. 3 of them didn't die in the hands of the enemy, but in the hands of the temperamental His Majesty. He was like a madman completely immersed in hatred, wantonly squandering his sword radiance and power, killing the whole dark world. Every day, countless people cursed him to die a horrible death and be struck by lightning. But no one and no power could stop him from moving forward. He was the founder and dominator of the Sword Dynasty. He was the chosen one of the dark world. He was the saint of the Lin clan. He was the sword god, Li Dongqing. Who told you to kneel down? Looking at the speaker kneeling at his feet, Li Dongqing narrowed his eyes slightly. Your Majesty, it's my fault. The chairman's entire body was covered in cold sweat. He really did not have much confidence. The rise of the Sword Dynasty was bloody and cruel. The number of people who had died at the hands of His Majesty, the Sword God, was in the double digits. As a chairman, he really did not think that his identity could protect him. You are the speaker of Jiangxia. Since you can stand here, you are one of my people. Li Dongqing said blandly, Don't my people have bones? Stand up, I don't need slaves, just a few of them are enough. He stretched out his palm. Azura bent down at the right time and let Li Dongqing's palm fall on his head. His face was full of fanaticism, and his eyes were filled with glory from the bottom of his heart. The speaker stood up tremblingly, his body shaking slightly. Stand up. Li Dongqing said blandly. You are a member of the dynasty. You don't need to be afraid of anything. Remember, when you contribute to the dynasty, the Sword Dynasty will also support you. Yes. The speaker finally straightened his body and focused his eyes on the legendary majesty in front of him. Li Dongqing was silent for a while, then slowly turned around. He glanced at the tombstone in front of him and knelt down. Azura, Dongqing, the speaker, and the high-level officials of the Jiangxia provincial government all knelt down with him. It was snowing heavily. Li Dongqing kowtowed 3 times seriously, then stood up and said, Let's go. The speaker straightened his body and blinked. A dense mist rose up. The 3 giants of the Sword Dynasty had disappeared. The world was empty. Only the falling snow. The frozen snow above the West Lake slowly fell. The sudden chill had already dissipated. In the hazy fog, Li Dongqing slowly walked out of the fog and sat in a black Rolls-Royce. He and Dongqing sat in the back. Azura sat in the front passenger seat. Airport. Li Dongqing said. He leaned back on the seat and turned his head to look at the snow outside the window. He didn't say anything else. The Rolls-Royce slowly moved forward, not too fast nor too slow. Dongqing opened a PDA and entered the Sword Dynasty's virtual conference room. She began to deal with the daily affairs of the dynasty. She saw a message and a few communication requests. She slightly raised her eyebrows and made a sound of surprise. Dongqing. She chuckled. Princess Alice of Navia has followed you here. She tried to contact you 12 minutes ago, but the communication was rejected by the system. She then sent 3 emails. 2 of them were apologies, and 1 of them was hoping to meet you. Tell her to scram. Li Dongqing looked at the snow outside the window and said indifferently. Dongqing's smile slightly stiffened and she asked doubtfully, Why? I remember that you seemed to like her a lot. A while ago, you often stayed over at her place. That was a while ago. Li Dongqing shook his head. I'm tired of it now. Tired? Dongcheng muttered to herself, her expression complicated. This answer sounded extremely cruel, but Dongcheng was already used to it. She didn't know when it started, but Li Dongqing had always been surrounded by all sorts of women. As the Sword Dynasty continued to expand, the blood and corpses brought fear to the people, but at the same time, it also allowed countless people to see the huge benefits. International supermodels, famous celebrities, rich heiresses, princesses of the royal family. Countless people tried their best to send the women they had painstakingly chosen to the Sword Dynasty to present to His Majesty, the Sword God. Li Dongqing had never once objected to this. As long as he was pleasing to the eye, he would not reject them. One after another, beautiful women of noble status entered his bed, and then left. Not a single one of them had stayed by Li Dongqing's side for more than a week. He was tired of playing. This was Li Dongqing's only reason. It wasn't an excuse, he was really tired of it. The Sword Dynasty headquarters had beautiful women from all over the world become maids, chefs, gardeners, administrative staff. Li Dongqing didn't care about them. They had all had intimate relationships with Li Dongqing, but it seemed that not long after, Li Dongqing didn't even remember their names. It was a kind of disregard that came from his bones. He didn't care about any women, and he didn't care about anything. That year, Li Dongqing was 36 years old. He didn't get married, he didn't have children, he didn't have a girlfriend. He had the biggest dynasty in the dark world, but he didn't care about it. His life was only about martial arts. He was known as the Sword God, but ever since he entered the invincible realm, he had even abandoned his sword. In Dongcheng's heart, this cousin of hers, who was already truly invincible, had always been a person with nothing. He didn't care about anything, and even instinctively hated this world. He struggled to reach the peak in hatred, and now even the martial arts he cared about the most had reached the end. What else did he have? He had nothing, only silence, only loneliness. He didn't like anything, he didn't care about anything, he didn't want anything, he didn't ask for anything. This was the most boring person, and also the scariest. His life seemed to be just a simple one, and he had turned his life into the most meaningless state. Dongcheng. Dongcheng softly called out. Yes. Have you been happy? Dongcheng's voice was faint, like a sigh. Li Dongqing was silent for a while, then the corner of his mouth slightly raised. That's not important. Then what's important? Dongcheng subconsciously raised her voice. Li Dongqing's gaze moved from the snowflakes outside the window to her. Dongcheng quietly stared at him, her face red. Cousin is angry. Li Dongqing's voice was very gentle. I know what you are thinking. I know what you're thinking, but that's exactly what I can't figure out. Those women, that Princess Alice, are annoying. I liked them before, but I don't like them anymore. I just want them to stay away from me. What's wrong with that? I don't owe them anything. She is the princess of the Navia royal family. After the fall of Rothschild, almost half of the assets will be transferred to the Navia royal family. This is a transaction. I hate it when they think about these things so complicatedly. What makes them think that by sleeping with me, they will become the mistress of Sword Dynasty? Are they worthy? I only need a woman in my life occasionally. Not a companion. Sword Dynasty also doesn't need a mistress. If there really is a mistress, it would only be you, cousin. They aren't worthy. Dongcheng's face turned red for a moment. She knew that Li Dongqing didn't mean it that way, but she couldn't help but think too much. She squeezed the computer in her hands, her eyes dazed, and shook her head. The Navia royal family has a lot of influence in Europe. If you reject Alice, it might cause some negative effects. I don't care about that. Li Dongqing leaned back and said indifferently, everyone has their own thoughts. As long as they don't put it into action, then it will always be a secret. They can be dissatisfied, but they better not make me dissatisfied. If anyone dares to jump out, just kill them. Contact Jing Jia, and let him go to Navia and ask their king. Do they want to live to take over Rothschild's assets, or do they want to all die? I am willing to fulfill their wishes. Dongcheng smiled bitterly. Before she could open her mouth, A call that bypassed Sword Dynasty's system suddenly lit up on the computer. It's Jingjia. Dong Chung picked it up. Princess Royal Highness. The computer did not light up, but an uneasy voice came from the other side of the computer. Jingjia, what's the situation with Rothschild? Dong Chung hid all her emotions and asked calmly. Dynasty has already taken over Rothschild's headquarters. Most of the core members of the Rothschild family have been killed, but Jingjia's voice became more and more uneasy. Dong Chung could even imagine him wiping his cold sweat. Speak. Li Dongqing suddenly opened his mouth, and his tone was simple. Your Majesty. Jingjia was slightly shocked and his voice trembled. He hesitated and said dryly, Your Majesty, I'm useless. I let Paul escape. Dong Chung was a little surprised. Paul was the current patriarch of Rothschild, and was also an expert at the peak of the invincible realm. However, he had been seriously injured for many years, and it was impossible for him to be Jingjia's opponent. Under such circumstances, he actually escaped. This was simply unbelievable. Li Dongqing was silent for a few seconds, and said indifferently, Trash. Yes, Your Majesty. Please listen to my explanation, I don't need to explain. Li Dongqing said indifferently, I want to go to Beihai to bring back my mother's remains. Jingjia, you have 3 days. After 3 days, either Paul dies, or you die. Do you understand? Jingjia took a deep breath, and said in a deep voice, I understand. Li Dongqing made a sound of agreement. The call ended. The carriage fell into silence once again. Dong Chung was dealing with the files on the computer, and she sent one order after another to all over the world. Go to Beihai first? Yes, Wang Jingxin wants to avoid me. The day before yesterday, he urgently visited Maple, and I insisted on seeing him. I have already informed the top management of Maple. By tomorrow at the latest, no matter what method they use, I want to see Wang Jingxin in Yuzhou. Li Dongqing shook his head. They should be sober now. For my enemies, they are only temporarily safe in Zhongzhou State. I am in Zhongzhou State, and the 160 dynasties are distributed all over the world. Where else can they hide? Dong Cheng was silent for a moment, and she was in a trance. At this moment, she suddenly thought of the legendary hostess of the Wang family of Beihai. Had she foreseen that this day would come? Maybe not. But from the year when Dong Chang became the holy disciple of the Lin clan, she should have known that this matter was destined to not end peacefully. Her talent was not excellent. After her husband died, she turned herself into a monster. A large number of mechanical metals were implanted into her flesh and blood. Countless gene potions of the Wang family of Beihai were integrated into her body. She used all means, gave up all the superficial things, and forcibly turned herself into the combat capability of the peak of the invincible realm. Everything seemed to be just for self-protection, to protect her Beihai. But what was the use? She could see every development of the Sword Dynasty. Every growth of the Sword God was stepping on the hearts of the superpowers in the dark world. The Lin clan protected him to enter the invincible realm under countless pressures and made countless sacrifices. All of these became the deepest hatred in Li Dongqing's heart. So from the very beginning, the Sword Dynasty was expanding in the craziest manner. From the very beginning, Li Dongqing's orders were mostly 4 words. Kill them all. The royal families of 2 countries. 2 retired presidents. Purgatory of Heaven Capital. Shadow Throne. Kunlun City. Heroes Club. Polar Ground Alliance. Men in Black. Countless strong enemies. His orders were always only 4 words. Kill them all. Their masters, their families, their friends' families, their friends' friends, anyone who had a little relationship with them. He killed them all. Under the will of the Sword God, the whole dynasty was like a hysterical beast venting its hatred, roaring and tearing up all the enemies. If this was a road of revenge, the Wang family of Beihai was undoubtedly the end. Another end. What else could he do besides killing the Wang family of Beihai? It's so pitiful. Dong Chengyu muttered to herself. They don't deserve pity. Li Dongqing said lightly, just like when our family was destroyed, when Grandpa was blown to death, when Grandma went crazy, when Aunt knelt down in prison because of brother, just like when you picked up trash to feed the 2 of us, sister. His calm eyes seemed to hide endless darkness and ice. Who pitied us? Yes. Dong Chengyu said softly, "The Lin clan." Li Dongqing was silent for a long time. "I'm sorry to master, but the Sword Dynasty didn't let the Lin clan down. The Lin clan had indeed sacrificed too much for him. His master had treated him unreservedly, and his master's son, the brilliant man who should have inherited the Lin clan and was like a father to Li Dongqing, had died in the hands of the enemy in order to protect him. For so many years, before the establishment of the Sword Dynasty, the Lin clan had been struggling almost every day." He was sorry to the man who had gradually become old. He could only try his best to compensate the Lin clan with the Sword Dynasty. "They all deserve to die." Li Dongqing looked in the direction of Beihai. His voice was very soft, but it had the determination to tear the world apart. A black Rolls-Royce drove into the airport in the wind and snow. A silver private jet was waiting quietly in the airport. The Rolls-Royce drove directly into the plane. The private plane slowly took off, entered the high altitude, and quickly left Lin N. Li Dongqing ate something casually, then sat on the sofa, quietly looking at the sky outside the window. Most of the time, he seemed to be like this. He didn't know fatigue. In addition to fighting, there was only silence. It was a dull, almost dead silence. The flowing clouds outside the window kept moving backward. The sea of clouds was magnificent and floated outside the window. Li Dongqing quietly watched for a while and closed his eyes. It was already afternoon when the plane landed in Beihai. It was also snowing heavily in Beihai. The snow was like goose feathers fluttering in the wind. Compared with Lin N, the temperature in Shenzhou was lower, biting cold. "Where are they? This group of bastards, how dare they? Your Highness Princess Royal, I killed them all. Why can't you contact them? They all want to die. The fifth corps of the dynasty is stationed in Snow Country. Within 12 hours, I will slaughter Shenzhou." Li Dongqing slowly opened his eyes. His eyes became calm and indifferent the moment he opened them. The hazy fog slowly dissipated as he woke up. Li Dongqing stood up. "Have we arrived?" Dong Cheng and Azura's voices suddenly stopped. Both of them looked a little embarrassed. Azura looked a little frightened. On the other hand, Dong Cheng was filled with rage and coldness. "What's going on?" Li Dongqing walked to the cabin door. "Your Majesty, no one from Zhongzhou State and Beihai came to greet us." Li Dongqing stopped in his tracks and turned around to look at him. "No one? Not a single one." Azura clenched his fists tightly, his whole body emitting a shocking murderous aura. Li Dongqing continued to walk forward and said indifferently, "Where are the people from the dynasty?" "None." Dong Cheng took over the conversation. Li Dongqing smiled. He had already walked out of the cabin. Looking at the fluttering snow and the empty road, he squinted his eyes and smiled. "Seems like something interesting happened here." Dong Cheng and Azura did not speak anymore. A grand welcoming ceremony was just something on the surface. But this was the scene of the Sword Dynasty. Other than Zhongzhou State, which country in the world dared to not give this face? Most importantly, before they left, Dong Cheng had already gotten in touch with the North Sea. Beihai confirmed again and again. Not only Beihai speaker, but the 9 council members of Zhongzhou State, other than Wang Jingxin, from the Prime Minister to the last one, all came to greet His Majesty the Sword God. Everyone was waiting for His Majesty the God of Swords in the wind and snow, including the Mistress of the North Sea. Dong Cheng did not feel that such etiquette was too much. The Sword Dynasty had enough rights to enjoy all kinds of treatment. The Sword Dynasty had 160 bases all over the world. With the death of Rothschild, the dynasty had practically ruled all of Europe and America. East Island had already surrendered yesterday. No matter which country the Sword God went to, there would be several high-level officials personally greeting him. Dong Cheng had never thought that His Majesty would receive such treatment when he came to Zhongzhou State. No one, even the people from the dynasty stationed in Shenzhou, did not come. Most importantly, all of them could not be contacted at this time. Where did the Wang family of Beihai get the guts to do this? Is Zhongzhou crazy? Dong Cheng found it hard to believe. I heard that the widow in Beihai underwent a crucial transformation. Maybe this gave them confidence? Li Dongqing sat in the car. The car drove out of the airport, but did not enter the underground of Shenzhou. Instead, it drove onto the surface. The entire Xingzhou was covered in snow, but other than that, there was nothing unusual. Li Dongqing squinted his eyes. Azura calmed down. Your Majesty, they are looking for death. Dongcheng did not speak. His Majesty of the Sword Dynasty came to Beihai this time to bring back his mother's remains. The dynasty had a clear requirement. Within 7 days, the whole Xingzhou city must be in mourning clothes. From the widow to the ordinary soldiers, everyone on Mount Dibing must wear mourning clothes. Beihai had started preparing since yesterday. But obviously, all the preparations were gone today. So our base in Beihai should have been destroyed. Otherwise they would have come. Dongcheng said slowly, Is the Wang family of Beihai ready to fight against the dynasty? They don't deserve it. Li Dongqing shook his head. Let's go and have a look. In the dense fog, the three suddenly disappeared in the car. Before the black Rolls-Royce left the city, Li Dongqing slowly walked out of the hazy fog. Mount Dibing was covered in snow. The quiet path had been cleaned up. Standing in front of the path, Li Dongqing quietly looked at the sacred mountain that symbolized the supreme power of Beihai. Still no one came to greet him. No one wore mourning clothes. Countless soldiers armed with live ammunition covered almost every corner of the mountain. Everyone was ready for battle. Ha! Li Dongqing laughed. His eyes suddenly became extremely cold. Your Majesty, I'll kill them all. Azura took a step forward with a grim smile. No need. Li Dongqing said faintly. They dare to put on such a formation, which means that the widow's transformation is very successful. In this case, I don't mind doing it myself. He didn't need to explain. Since Mount Dibing was ready for war, then the dynasty would give them a war. In the process of expanding the territory of the Sword Dynasty in the Dark World for more than a decade, they had only one purpose, which had never changed. Those who obeyed them would prosper, and those who opposed them would die. Li Dongqing took a step forward. The next moment, his voice directly echoed in every corner of Mount Dibing. The roar was like thunder. Song Si Haotian, come out to see me. Come to see me. See me. The clear and cold voice kept echoing. In an instant, Mount Dibing was completely boiling. Countless snipers who were guarding in every corner of the mountain suddenly grasped the sniper rifles in their hands. They wanted to aim, but the endless voice suddenly echoed. Puff! The bodies of countless snipers hiding in the mountains suddenly exploded into pieces of flesh and blood all over the sky. Mount Dibing was in chaos. A cold voice rang from the distant top of the mountain. Who? In the face of such a question, Li Dongqing's eyes became more and more cruel. You! He raised his palm. The wind and snow in the distance trembled slightly. A fallen leaf covered by the wind and snow fell into his hand. Damn you all! At this moment, there was no sword in his hand. It seemed that from the moment he entered the invincible realm, he, who was known as the sword god, no longer used a sword. The leaf that fell into his hand was thrown out by him. The world was silent. The world was originally silent. However, amidst the extreme silence, the quiet world suddenly became incomparably chaotic. It was like a wind blowing. The leaf suddenly burst forth with an incomparably dazzling light. There was no sound. The mighty sword intent shrouded Mount Dibing in an instant. Around Mount Dibing, every flower, every tree was torn apart. In the extreme silence, the fallen leaf spun crazily in the air and kept moving forward, getting bigger and bigger, almost covering the entire sky. One leaf covered the sky. Mount Dibing. Stage of formidable person. Summer Solstice, who had completely recovered to her heyday, suddenly turned back and stared at the foot of the mountain. In the unseen world, there seemed to be a sharp light that could tear the sky and the earth suddenly rushing over. The wildly spinning leaf kept flying. All the leaves on the whole mountain seemed to fly up under this sword, covering the wind and snow and the sky. The whole Mount Dibing was torn under this sword. There were only leaves in front of her. But in her perception, there was sword light between heaven and earth. Endless sword light surged from the foot of the mountain. The internal guards stationed at the foot of the mountain were all killed in an instant. The elites hidden in the mountain were smashed by the sword chi. Thunder-shocking realm, fire-flaming realm, ice-condensing realm. Countless people and countless elites turned into flesh and blood all over the sky without any room for resistance. Mount Dibing trembled wildly. The sword energy had gone deep into the ground. Wherever the sword light passed, The road along the way had been completely cut in half. Several deep underground laboratories kept exploding under the pressure of the sword energy. The overwhelming leaves rushed to the top of the mountain. Every leaf was glowing. The gloomy sky was completely illuminated, as if it were daytime. The grand hall that had been built at the top of Mount Dibbing instantly turned into powder. Whether it was the strongest alloy or the trees, they were all torn like a piece of thin paper under the sword light. Mount Dibbing was completely torn apart. From the bottom to the top it was torn into two peaks. The leaves that covered the sky were still surging and directly appeared in front of summer solstice. Buzz! The silver moon sword on the stone of formidable person seemed to feel its own threat. The body of the sword suddenly vibrated, driving the boulder below to suddenly rotate. The surging sword intent directly swept into the leaves. Compared with the leaves that covered the sky, the sword light of the silver moon was like a small river in front of the sea. There was no comparison. But as the sword light blended into the leaves, the entire mighty sword energy suddenly became extremely scattered. The sword intent that was condensed to the extreme suddenly seemed to have two wills. The mighty sword energy was madly weakened. One part was still rushing to summer solstice, while the other part crossed the sky and went straight into the deep sea. Boom! Nearly half of the power of the sword was directly diverted, and the sea surged crazily. Suddenly, a tsunami that was hundreds of meters tall appeared on the surface of the sea thousands of meters away. A small warship suddenly exploded under the sword will. In the fire that soared into the sky, the extremely sharp sword will lit up in the fallen leaves for a moment. It was like the light of the 6 paths of reincarnation, but it was instantly extinguished. Summer Solstice's body was thrown up by the surging sword light. Countless leaves penetrated her body. She was covered in blood and hit hard on the stone of formidable person. Her whole face was pale, and there was only fear in her eyes. She could not imagine the power of this sword. Even if it was only half of the sword's power, she was still seriously injured in an instant. Someone at the foot of the mountain seemed to make a sound. Li Dongqing took another step forward. His step directly crossed countless dead bodies. 1 step ago, he was still at the foot of the mountain. The next second, he had appeared directly on the stage of formidable person. Summer Solstice fell in front of the stone. She was covered in blood and her face was full of disbelief. She stared at the young man in front of her and said in a trembling voice, "Who are you?" Li Dongqing glanced at her. He only felt that she was a little familiar, but he could not remember where he had seen her. Besides Song Ci, when did the Wang family of Beihai have another expert at the peak of the invincible realm? He frowned and said blandly, "Li Dongqing of the Sword Dynasty. Who are you? Where is Song Ci?" Summer Solstice was a little confused. She did not know why he mentioned Song Ci. She took a deep breath and said, "I am Summer Solstice." The air suddenly became extremely quiet. Li Dongqing stood stiffly where he was. The silver moon sword suddenly left the stone of formidable person and fell into Li Dongqing's hand intimately. Li Dongqing was silent for a long time. He stroked the silver moon sword in his hand. After a long time he said softly, "This is my father's sword. My father's sword intent." No wonder. Summer Solstice's pupils suddenly contracted for a moment, as if she was greatly stimulated. Li Dongqing raised his eyelids. "You are Summer Solstice?" he asked. Summer Solstice nodded, a little stupefied. Li Dongqing put the silver moon sword back into the stone of formidable person and was silent for a long time. He felt that the woman in front of him was a little familiar. He felt that the name Summer Solstice was a little familiar. It was not until now that he remembered where he had heard the name. He raised his head and looked at the flying snow in the air. His eyes became a little confused. "So?" He stood on the stage of formidable person and asked, "Where am I now?" You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.